Well, you did a good weekend. We just the
Yeah, moved by Tyrone, seconded by Essie. And also asking if there are any declarations of interest from any members. So either now at the beginning of the meeting or as we proceed through the agenda, if a declaration of interest is required, please feel free to make it at the time. I take it there are none right now. So we'll move
to... we vote on the apologies?
Yes, yeah, it was very slow. Oh no, we didn't, sorry. We just moved and seconded.
Just going to ask them.
Yes, sorry. So we will step back to vote on them. It's a very full agenda, so I'm trying to move too quickly. All those in favour of accepting the apologies? Right. Yeah. Anyone against? There we go. So now let's move second and vote on confirmation of the previous minutes. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to read those. Moved by Tyrone. Somebody a second?
Yep.
Lynn? All those in favour? Right. Any against? Carried. Which gets us to our public forum. And first on our list is Sarah Vanderberg. Welcome. And I believe we have a slide there also for Sarah.
Oh, right. I just have a background piece.
Nice.
So, kia ora koto. Thank you very much. And I'm here. Have you got it? There it is. You can't see it very well. It says cruise ships do no good. I did not have anything to do with the painting of this, but it does indicate a little bit about where we are with cruise ships in Littleton. And we know from Akaroa some of the problems of this. So I'm a resident of Littleton and I have come to ask for your help. We are being overrun as a community on days that these big ships are in. And I believe, I don't know who else to go to, who has responsibility. When I ask, there are so many different bodies who have responsibility that ultimately no one has responsibility here for them. And as a community, I think we have some rights that we should be respected and that it's important for us to balance, create a both and, not an either or mentality. And that while some of this is about money, well, okay, all of this is about money. Why do we have tourists here? It's because of money. So I understand we need some money, we need revenue, our businesses need revenue. It's been a tough 2.5, 3 years. But I also believe that we can collectively figure out how to manage this so that the community does not lose its sense of who the community is and why we moved here all these years ago. I mean, I've been here a long time in Littleton. I think it's just really important, and I need to come and ask for help because I don't know who else to go to. And I think if we don't do something pretty soon, we're going to end up with more of this, with more anger, and with something actually happening, and I'm concerned about that. I know that there's a destination management plan that's being put in place and that there's one for Banks Peninsula, one for Christchurch. I have been in contact with Ali Adams and I have looked at the destination management plan, and my understanding is that we have the first one, which is going to be about the narrative, right? Who do we want to be? Who are we? and the second is about actually what do people want. The first does look a bit like a marketing plan to me, that like what we're simply doing is trying to figure out how we're going to market and make more money from these communities. And I think there has to be a balance between the community input. What does the community want? Maintaining the integrity of our communities and money. Shouldn't be all about money. And what my experience is we always put businesses over the community. And I think we need to really have this conversation. So my hope is that you will come and help us have that conversation, because as I said, I don't know who else to go to. And I think as a community, we should have some input. So before we end up with Akaroa 2.0. Okay, any questions? How did I do? How many minutes did I do?
I'm going to say about 3.5.
Okay, great. Nigel.
Well, I'm very sympathetic.
Thank you. Right, yes.
We've had to weather the storm for a number of years.
Yes.
And, what sort of group backing do you have? Is there a small group, and is there a lobby group being formed?
So, well, I've come here first.
Yeah.
I could have done a petition. I could have gotten a lot of people angry on Facebook, because there are a lot of angry people. But I chose not to do that. I chose to come here first so that we can try to remove the stress and reduce the stress in the system, because there's so much of it already from COVID, et cetera. So there are a lot of people who are interested and concerned. Sal came with me. I said to her the other day, I'm coming to do a deputation. She said, what can I do to help? And she said, I'll come with you. So plenty of people would have come, but I have purposely stepped back to try to take the anger and energy and figure out a way to do this with compassion and integrity. So,
Thank you.
but I am willing to go to the next level if I have to.
Tyrone has a question.
Yes.
Timing wise probably has to be our last one.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
So it's probably reasonable that if we did as much community engagement as possible, like survey or whatever it was, questionnaire, talk to as many people as we could, just try and actually understand what people are feeling.
Yes.
That would probably be a reasonable starting point. And from that, we'd have some data that we could actually sort of leverage off. And I understand your point about like nobody taking responsibility. It is a bit tricky. There are a lot of moving parts to that. And so I hope everyone sort of picked up on that point. It is quite tricky in that regard.
Right.
Think about that. But anyway, sorry, my question is, do you think it's a reasonable start?
Yes. I think it's very reasonable to find out from the community. I cannot speak for everyone. I can only speak for the people, for myself and for a few others, but we need to find out. I'm also speaking at ECAN on Wednesday, and it's very difficult from them. And my point with ECAN is environmental. I want to understand, our environmental regulations strong enough and are reinforcing them. But it's also the same from an environmental point of view, that nobody owns this. Everybody has a bit part. And that means, I believe, my fear is that there will be not as much regulation and enforcement as there should be. So it's the same problem across the book.
It will be not be the first thing that you'll find across the peninsula where there's a multi-agency situation.
Tried messing around
And I
other
think we need
ways.
to figure out how to solve that.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for raising the issue. Thanks for
Yeah.
travelling to Little River in an e-car.
I know, thank you. Yes.
Noted. And but also thank you for having a really clear, like coming at this point and having a very clear request of this.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And is it rude if we leave?
No, not at all.
Okay. Maybe
In
we
fact,
did want to see, but then it might be hard.
Positively endorsed the water
Yeah, okay, great. Thank
to
you.
allow space for others to arrive.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, yeah, but I gotta get home. I've got to plug in for a bit.
There you go.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Sarah. Thanks, Sal. Cheers. Now, my understanding is that we now have Pam Richardson.
Well, I didn't really want to take up very much of your time. I'm Pam Richardson. I'm board chair, an old board chair of the Banks Peninsula Community Board and the Akaroa River Community Board. I've been long involved in community affairs. I'm a community champion, involved with setting up the Akaroa Community Health Trust, Early Learning Centre, Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust. The list is very long. but it's about community resolving issues by working together. So I was just looking at the list of appointments that you've got on your list. And so I just really wanted to update you on a few of those. The Banks Peninsula Pest Liaison Committees are no longer in operation. They've been disbanded, and it's now Pest Free Banks Peninsula that's dealing with those sort of issues. Also, the Biosecurity Advisory Groups, which are Environment Canterbury committees, and they're very much like the Reserve Management Committees. They have terms of reference. They meet 3 or 4 times a year together. They're about supporting Environment Canterbury with advocacy. We've just recently had a symposium in Little River here where people came and talked about all their operations that they were involved with and things. So it's not an onerous committee, but it's one that I would hope that we're going through a new appointment process, and I'm planning on putting my name forward again. And I would hope that whoever is the Banks Peninsula appointment does attend those meetings and gets involved. I'm not sure that I saw anyone at the last meeting, so at the last round of meetings. So I would expect if someone is appointed that they do join those meetings. And then the third one is the Huratini Hallsville Drainage Scheme, of which I've been representing the board for the last 6 years. I took over from Stuart Miller, who was a long time member of that committee. These are very old committees. They go back to the river rating districts were set up in the 1860s around a lot of the works that were done out on the plains to drain the land and provide productive land in that particular area around the Hallsville, Ellesmere area. And so the ill-defined natural streams in the plains land of the catchment have developed into closely settled, highly productive farming district. And it's been made possible by the installation of drains. So it's a long historical situation. But as we've got a little bit of city council land in that area, a few ratepayers, very few, tiny few around the Kaituna area, they asked for a Banks Peninsula or a representative of the Christchurch City Council. Last year, I was on the committee last year and tried to look at getting perhaps staff involvement in that, and you'll see in the report that's in your agenda today that the recommendation that it is a community person. So I'm quite happy to continue if no one else is happy to continue, and happy to work alongside someone that wants to join that. It is all about setting or advising Environment Canterbury on the setting of rates for those landowners around that area, about their management plans, and their work that they're doing in those drains. And the majority of it is about cleaning the drain with a machine, or hand weeding, planting of areas, removing of willows, but just making sure that there is a good drainage pathway down to Lake Ellesmere. The City Council's got as the top end of it, and they have got swales and catchments and things, but they eventually drain into these drainage systems. So there's just a little brief snapshot, just to let you know what's going on. So yeah.
Thank you. Were there any questions from around the table? No. All good. Always do such a good job. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ben.
I will wait and listen to you.
Right.
I've come over the hill, so it's no use going home until I've got my band.
And you get a coffee over the road.
Yes.
Okay, so thanks again, Pam and Suki Thompson.
I have got a PowerPoint. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's just on the way.
Just having a few technical issues this morning. Well, while you're sorting that out, I'll just introduce myself. So kia ora koutou katoa. My name's Suki Thompson. For those of you who don't know me, I've been very involved with heritage for many years in Akaroa, chair of the Civic Trust for a few years, used to take guided walks around the town for many years. And I've spent 11 years as the manager of the Donald Banks Peninsula Trust, so involved with acquiring land for public benefit and public access. But today I am here on behalf of the Robinsons Bay Ratepayers Association to talk to you about this outstanding opportunity we have for heritage in Robinson's Bay. So sorry, we've got quite a few chickens.
This is all good. It just means you get a little bit of extra time.
Yeah, I was going to say, when he's starting the clock there.
We won't
So,
start until we're ready, so
Yeah,
Take
well,
full
I'll
advantage.
just to sort of get started, and when they've got the slides up, you know, I can go through that a bit quicker for you. So the situation is, for those of you who are new to the board, the council bought a large chunk of land in Robinson's Bay about a year and a half, 2 years ago for the Akara wastewater project. The bottom part of the land has got the old heritage sawmill site on it. It's written up in this book. It features on the back of Gordon Ogilvy's Banks Peninsula Cradle of Canterbury. There is a painting of the site from the 1870s. So this is a significant heritage site which has been recognised for many years. So that's on the bottom of this wastewater land. It's in an area that is largely unusable for the wastewater project because of the wetness of the land. It's got to be a setback for the wastewater from streams, and the main Robinson's Bay stream runs through this part of land, of course, because the original sawmill was run by a water wheel. So there's the old mill ponds, tramways, all this sort of thing there. Now, adjacent to that land, originally part of it, but now adjacent to it because it's been cut off, is this old cottage, which is called now the Pavitt Cottage, which was the mill owner's cottage. And that cottage is on a separately titled block now. It was cut off from the main land about 20 odd years ago when it was purchased by a descendant of those original mill owners and fully restored and put into a private family trust for the benefit of the descendants of those mill owners to come back and have holidays there. And the opportunity which has now arisen is the fact that that Pavitt Cottage Trust, the trustees are now elderly and in ill health, and they are looking to wind up that family trust. They wanted to, or they originally thought they would have to sell the cottage, but now they have decided they would like to gift it to the community. And the community, sure, here we go. So, yeah, what we've got is this outstanding opportunity here on the heritage site. So just to fill you in on what I've been talking about, 11 Sawmill Road, that's the land the council purchased. That's the Sawmill archaeological sites down at the bottom there. The orange is 5 Sawmill Road. That is the Pavitt Cottage land. The Robinson's Bay Ratepayers Association commissioned an archaeological report earlier this year because one had not been made publicly available. And the point here is it's a really significant site. Starting that first water wheel powered sawmill on Banks Peninsula is where the whole logging industry began. It affected the environmental change for good or for bad across the whole peninsula. It was a major milestone in early history. Many families started here, and it is the Taronga Waiwai, the community hub of Robinson's Bay. So yeah, I've shown you that painting, wonderful painting. You can see the original water wheel here, the ponds, the flume that fed the waterway. By this stage, the mill has been converted to a steam mill. And here's the cottage. This is the boss's house. That's what's so fantastic. It's a really modest house. It's the boss's house. Now, the significance has been recognised for decades. Orville Williams, the last of the Williams family, last mill owner, descendant to live there, wanted to create a historic reserve with 10 acres of land and a cottage. He didn't manage to pull it off. He sold it to Murray Thacker of the O'Kane's Bay Museum. Murray agreed to protect all the historic aspects of the mill site. In 1987, the Historic Places Trust erected the signboard there. And the books that I've shown you have been published and talk about it. And then in 2000, this mill cottage was subdivided off and purchased by a descendant of the original Pavitt family. And he fully restored it and left it to this Pavitt family trust. It's absolutely beautiful inside. We'll be inviting you all to come over and have a look because it's a wonderful place. It's listed in the district plan. Heritage New Zealand are coming next week to start the process of listing it. So the opportunity is
The Pavitt Trust are winding up due to ill health. I want to gift this cottage to a community charitable trust because that would fulfill the desire of their brother, their father, who bought this cottage and did it up and then died the day that it opened of cancer, to protect the heritage. The associated archaeological sites are now in council ownership, and that's what opens up this wonderful opportunity to surplus to the requirements of the wastewater project. And what we're asking and saying is we would be willing as a community to set up a charitable trust and accept the cottage, provided that we can marry it back together again with its archaeological sites, with the mill site. Then what we would do if we have got the understanding, here comes Annette and Marie also from Robinson's Bay. Come in, guys. Yeah, I'm sure you can squeeze in. We would then set up a community trust, create a heritage reserve there with full integrity, open it to the public, and manage the cottage and land cohesively within a community ownership structure. That is what we are seeking to do. So there's really strong community support for the project, very timely. Marie Rhodes, descendant of people who lived in the cottage, Annette, one of the neighbours, Phil and Janie here, also from Robinson's Bay. We recently had it open for various events. We had it open in the garden tour a couple of weeks ago. We had 19 volunteers baking and turning up to help. We have got Lee Robinson of Saunders Robinson Brown, one of our community, helping us with the legal side. And we also have a lot of descendants from associated families who are very keen on the project. So the benefits to the council would be this would protect a highly significant heritage area, would achieve community outcomes for the council, strong sense of community, participation in civic life and celebration of heritage, but there would be no ongoing cost to the council because it would not be a council reserve, it would be a reserve owned by a community-run charitable trust. So we would take responsibility for the costs. It would provide recreational community benefit out of the wastewater project, which has been very controversial and very upsetting to the people of Robinson's Bay. And it would provide an opportunity for our community to give some support to the wastewater project in the upcoming consent process if we felt that the council was working with us to recognise the heritage value of the site and to join with us in the project as we want to carry it out. So our request to you as our community board is to act decisively now. Please do not delay or the opportunity will be lost. The Pavitt Family Trust chair was on the phone to me this weekend going, we have got to get this moving. He's going to hospital for another operation, having had 2 strokes this year. One member of the committee's already died. The ones in Upper who kept everything going, Nigel, you'll know, on their absolute last legs. So we must move on this. So what we're asking from you as a community board, and I know you're hidebound by all your rules, but one way or another, we are asking you to figure out how to support us and match that Pavitt family gift by gifting the land containing the archaeological sites and how to get this project moving so that it happens in parallel with the resource consent process. Because the wastewater staff are saying, yes, okay, we probably don't need it for the irrigation, but we just want to hang on to it till the resource consent is all done and dusted. And we know that is going to take some time because it isn't even notified yet. It's supposed to be notified in July. Here we are in December and it's not notified. Then there's got to be submissions. Then it'll get appealed, quite likely by the community if we're unhappy with it. So, you know, this is an important step here for both the wastewater project and heritage. So figure out a way that we can move on it. Please come and visit the site. We hoped you'd come on your January bus tour. That doesn't seem possible. We will be extending an invitation to all of you to come either in January or early February and join us for a morning tea at the Pavitt Cottage. And you can come and have a look at the site and some other things and, you know, have a day in Upper. And I will work with you, Ruben, to find out whether it's better in January or February for your members. And if you can't do that, then come before your February 6th meeting, March 6th meeting in Upper. We hope to be invited to a forum in February. And finally, we're asking that you invite us to your forum in February and make sure that any staff reports that are needed are there by February so that the discussion can progress and we don't keep in this polling pattern because we already brought this to you last May and it's been sitting since. So thank you all for listening, and thank you people from Robinson's Bay for coming, and welcome to ask any questions.
Thanks very much. Thanks for that. That's a very full presentation we got there, which is great. And it would be good for us to continue engaging with staff too around that process ahead of the 20th of February.
And I've just got these to hand out to you if you take one each and pass them along.
Thank you. Now, timing wise, I'm just aware that we ran slightly over,
Yep.
so time for questions probably been consumed, but we yeah, so if the conversation can happen in February, obviously that's quite a wee way off, but that will be a longer, more open discussion.
I think if we can let the Pavitt Cottage Trust know, the Pavitt Family Trust know, that we've had some sort of good reception, that we're being invited back in February, that community board members are coming over, that will keep them hanging on. So, yeah.
Right. Thanks. Thank you. Much appreciated. Okay, so we're now moving into presentations by appointments, and we'll probably there a bit of transition in the room. Arrivals and departures. Thanks again.
Thank you.
So those people who are watching from the corridor can now have a seat inside the room if they wish. Standing room only a little bit. Yeah, so
we normally have that.
just as we head into deputations, just a reminder to all presenters that and all guests that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and that we have 10 minutes.
I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to sit here and listen. Sorry? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. And that we have 10 minutes for each deputation, and the first, Andrew Turner. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm just going to check that you can see and
You can't hear you
before I start. Just checking that you can see and hear me before I
Sorry,
start.
was just having some technical issues with getting your audio.
Oh, sorry.
Check that it is a
Here we
problem
go.
on my end. We good?
Just having some technical issues with getting your audio.
Someone that sounds exactly like you.
So I think you may have the live stream on, Andrew, which you'll now need to turn off or mute.
Yeah. Window open, nothing more.
So I think you may have the live stream on. Okay. How's that?
I
you
can
just-
hear loud and clear.
Now
Can
we
you
can't
hear
hear
me?
you anymore. So my understanding, and I could be incorrect, is that you possibly have the live stream open on your computer.
No.
Andrew.
No.
No?
No.
So someone else must, and we must have audio up on their feed. Everyone else is muted.
Everyone's muted. We don't have another pickup in the room.
The only connection I've made is the Zoom link.
So no one else in the room has Zoom open?
Okay, let's try it again.
The only connection I've made is the Zoom link.
Yeah, okay. We can hear you now.
You can.
And if we're all very quiet and don't speak, it should work.
All right, very good. So, kia ora koutou, Tamika kia koutou. Great to be here this morning. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you at the meeting today. Good to see a very busy room full of people. Obviously, quite a busy meeting this morning, and be a table for a change.
But
So,
ongoing issues here which are making it, we can't hear you over us. We're getting some kind of a loop.
your mic, your end. Is that better? No. So now I can't hear you, but as long as you can hear me, we're good to go. Yep. All right. So good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. Good to see such a busy meeting this morning and good to be part of it. I'm speaking here today in my capacity as the relatively new manager of the Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust. I expect and I hope that this will be the first of many interactions that the Trust will be having with this new community board in the spirit of partnership and in the spirit of getting the very best for our local communities and for our local environment. Now, the part of your agenda that I'm particularly interested in today relates to the re-establishment of the head-to-head. Sorry, just one moment. The part of the agenda that I'm particularly interested in today relates to the re-establishment of the head-to-head walkway party and what happens next after that. So head-to-head is one project that the Rod Donald Trust has had a really strong interest in. And in fact, the further development and the completion of the walkway is one of the strategic goals in our own Striding Forward strategic directions documents, which is available on our website. And if you haven't had the opportunity to have a look at that, I suggest that you do as a good starting point for understanding what the Rod Donald Trust is all about, what we do, and what our priorities are. The head-to-head walkway, as some will be aware, has been around as what is described by council as an aspirational project for a long time. It was an election issue for community board candidates when I first stood for election to the community board back in 2010, and it had already been around as a concept well before that time. And I guess the point I'm making is that we've had aspirations. We've actually had good aspirations for a very long time. There's been some good work done on the ground over a number of years, but there does remain a lot to do to progress and to finish this project. The joy of the head-to-head is that it's very accessible from the city. It will be able to be completed either as a whole walkway over a number of days, or it can be done in bite-sized pieces. And of course, it'll improve recreational access opportunities for local residents right on their doorstep for those people that live around Littleton Harbour. There's significant community and landowner interest in the project, and there are people out there that are absolutely willing to volunteer and to partner with us. We just need to tap into that. We just need to have the conversations. We need to be working with communities and with landowners in a way that works for them to make this into a reality. The Rod Donald Trust, of course, has got significant interest and success in creating recreational access on Banks Peninsula. Using Tara Patica as an example, this is the walkway that goes from Gebby's Pass to the hilltop, and which we hope eventually will link Littleton and Diamond Harbour with Little River and Akaroa, has involved some quite complex access arrangements and a joined up approach to marketing and promoting the walkway across those multiple land ownerships. It's involved working with the council, with DOC, and with a number of private landowners to create a walkway that already has got significant value to residents and to visitors. Compare head to head and what needs to be done here. And there are some pretty obvious big similarities. So what I'd like to do today is to make an offer to the community board that the Rod Donald Trust wants to talk about how we can better work in partnership with the board and with council and with others to expedite the development of this walkway and how we can turn this from an aspirational project into a reality as soon as possible and talk about what we can contribute in terms of our experience, our knowledge, our ways of working and our relationships towards making that happen. So I've got some specific requests of the board today to get that board rolling. The first one should be reasonably easy to meet. Please re-establish the head-to-head walkway working party with the terms of reference and membership recommended, and then let's meet as soon as possible. Please set a date for the workshop, which was requested in the last term of the working party, and let's have that workshop as soon as possible. Please work with the Rod Donald Trust and possibly others to co-create that workshop so that we all get the best value from it, including consideration of future roles, future responsibilities, and different ways of working. And let's have that conversation as soon as possible. And then also have a think about what co-creation and partnership could really look like in this space, using all our resources to best ability approach so that we can really stride forward with progressing this walkway over the next 3 years, the life of this community board, and really make it one of the legacies of this community board that's just starting out at the beginning of this triennium. Thanks very much indeed for your time today, and I'm now happy to take any questions.
There we go. Hopefully you can hear us now, Andrew.
Loud and clear.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. An excellent presentation. We would expect no less, of course, from you. And some really clear requests at the end of it too. Were there any questions from anyone around the table? All right.
Kia ora, Andrew. Tyrone here. In terms of the council allocated capital funding for the Head Walkway, which is from memory about 150 to 200k a year historically. Do you have any specific comments about that? Is it enough? Is it?
I think this is about timing and sequencing. The capital funding is really going to be driven by what the council can afford. And I think this project represents really good value for money, particularly if we work in the way that I'm suggesting. But it's more about what we can deliver. You know, what I wouldn't want would be council to put more money on budget that we can spend because we don't have the opportunity to deliver. But clearly what I'm talking about today is perhaps how we can deliver this in a different way. So the ideal would be reinstate the working party today, have the workshop as early as possible so that that can determine the priorities for the next 3 years. That in turn feeds into what budget's required over the next 3 years, which in turn, you know, really translates into what needs to plan. So we need to have had those conversations early in the new year so that you as our local councillor can take that to the council table and advocate for item in the in the annual plan and subsequently in the LTP. The ideal here is if we can deliver more, if we can do more quickly within the existing funding which is available. So yeah, the funding needs to match the activity, but what I'm talking about is how we can do the activity differently to get things moving faster, more efficiently, and get more value for money than council could ever do on its own.
It's very helpful and thorough. Thank you, Andrew.
Excellent. Asif?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I've got a question. Why these working parties were dismantled or continue working at first?
So that will be a question for your staff there rather than for me, but in typical style, I'll answer it anyway. The working parties are disbanded at the end of the triennium with each community board and need to be reinstated at the beginning of the new community board term, which is exactly the reason that you've got the paper in front of you today.
Yep. Okay, so you mentioned that you are suggesting co-creation and partnership with the council. So what do you see in the long run? Like what sort of partnership, what more activities you are looking at? How does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, I see that this is a council project and it's right that it should be a project. I mean, this is something that was agreed to and formally put on budget many years ago when Bob Parker was the mayor. But I just think there's an opportunity for us to be working very differently to deliver this project in a co-created way, using the resources that we've got in the community. And I'm not just talking about the Rod Donald Trust there, I'm talking about some of the other community groups and potential partners around the harbour to deliver this differently. So, you know, Rod Donald Trust, we're very good at talking to private landowners. We're very good at creating access in perpetuity over various different types of ownership. And I think we've got skills and ability there that in terms of how we can be good partners in this project, we can really bring to the table and perhaps open some doors that we've found difficult to open in the past. I guess what I'm saying is if council really works in partnership and allows others to lead aspects of this project rather than council thinking it needs to do everything itself, we probably could make a whole lot more progress. There are community members and community groups around the harbour that know a lot more about the way that they think the route should go through their communities, past their communities, than any of the rest of us that don't live in that landscape do. And I think we need to be tapping into that differently and more extensively. And it's just about finding a way that we can work in partnership, finding a way that we can co-create to do that, rather than people feeling that they're helping with a council project, feeling that they're in partnership with a community project.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Thanks again, Andrew, for joining today, and thank you for persevering through our initial technical issues with our strange loops of audio. We got there in the end, and that was a really clear message that I think was very well timed for the board.
Pleasure, and I'm always happy to be attending. Thank you very much indeed.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
So we have two further deputations this morning, both on the Birdlings Flat street lighting, and the first of those is from Helen. Welcome, Helen.
Hello.
We won't have any technical issues with you because you're sitting at the table.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to present my submission. My name is Dr. Helen Whelan, and I live at 12 Clifton Street. My submission is specifically for the street light at 8 Clifton Street, and that's in the central part of Clifton Street. So if you can, so that's Clifton Street from start to finish, and this is the street light that I'm referring to at 8 Clifton Street, and our property is just straight across the way. So really, really close.
Yeah.
So very specific submission. So I request that the proposed plan go ahead as notified, just with the one exception, and that's the removal of this light at 8 Clifton Street, because it goes against the wishes of the vast majority of the residents that took part in the surveys. So in these surveys, the only choice that mentioned retaining this light in the centre of Clifton Street was option 1, and that's the ability to retain and upgrade all the existing street lights. All the other choices did not include the retention of this light. So option 2 was no lights. Option 3 was lighting at the main street intersections. And option 4 was the 3 lights along the main street. So option 1 was really the only choice that related to the inclusion of this light. And in that, in survey 1, only 10% of people wanted option 1, retaining all the lights. And in survey 2, only 14% wanted this. So in other words, 86 to 90% of people did not vote for the light in the centre of Clifton Street to remain. And even if you look at the specific results for Clifton Street, there were only 3 out of 9 properties that wanted this light to stay, option 1. And therefore, 6 out of 9 properties wanted the light to go, which is options 2, 3, and 4. So I'm just confused as to why this light has been brought back into the plan, why it's been considered for keeping up with the strong majority who didn't vote for it. And also it would be very easy now to exclude it from the proposed plan. So only have the 6 instead of the 7 lights. So I'm requesting that this light to be excluded from the plan. It shines directly onto my property and into my bedroom, and there's no trees in the area to stop the light from shining in. This light is intrusive and unhealthy as it affects quality of sleep before the new proposed midnight cutoff, even with suitable curtains. Now, I was pleased to hear the council state at one of the recent community meetings that their wish was for no intrusion of light onto people's properties. Now, I visited Barnes Street in Christchurch, where shielded LED lights have been installed. These are the ones that are going into Birdlings Flat. The shields did help stop the light going onto the properties directly behind, but they did not stop the flow of light flowing into the properties to the side of the lights. I was able to observe this by walking into the stream reserve beside one of the lights, so I could see what it was like going away from the street. Also, Clifton Street, it's a very bare community. It doesn't have many blocking trees, similar to those found on Barnes Street. My understanding from feedback at the community meeting was that there were fewer safety issues during the no light trial period. So even if people in Clifton Street are concerned about safety, they can
easily and cheaply install motion sensors that only turn on when there is movement of their property. Also, the late plan inclusion of this light at 8 Clifton Street to allow for more uniform lighting is also not justified due to the lack of support from the voters. Plus, there are other streets in the area that might intersect with one of these lights that are going to stay, but they aren't getting more lights to make the lighting more uniform in those areas. So in conclusion, considering that there was the overwhelming majority, 86 or 90% of residents did not want the light at 8 Clifton Street, it should be removed from the proposed plan. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Short and sweet.
Yeah, very well put. Any questions at all from around? Just because that map has moved past me, can you just refresh my memory as far as you?
So this is the main.
Where the light's proposed to go and where your property is.
Sure.
Is your property, would the light sit facing your property, or
No,
would your property
it's-
be behind it?
It's, we're not behind the light on the street, we're to the side. So, so that light is, it's actually where my, pass it down, that's where my blue pen is.
And so my understanding, because we've had some briefings on the lights when the rollout happened across, in the last term when the rollout happened across Littleton and most of Christchurch. Yeah, and Akaroa, and is that there's the shrouds that can go around the back of the light to stop fall off, but also that the angles can be adjusted.
Yes, are these, the lights that I looked at Barn Street have got, they're like flails. So it's not like a wraparound U-shaped shield. They're like small pieces of metal that go across, that slot into the face of the lights. So as I say, it helps to stop the light going onto the property directly behind, but the light still flows out to the side. And I was able to see that in that reserve.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions from anybody? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So the final deputation and also on Birdling's Flat street lighting issue is from Vince. Welcome to the table.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have this historic photo here that can be passed around. It shows the original street lights of Coates Road going back pre-1950, and then some changes that have happened over the years to realignment with the Birdling's Flat Lands Title Act and other issues. And I've been heavily involved with practically everything that's happened at Birdling's Flat, whether it's water or roads or titles. So I have a long history. I don't have a lot of faith in Christchurch City Council, to be honest. I'll make a point quite clear to the community board that I think this whole lighting issue is just absolutely disgusting, because the community fought to have street lights. So I think the first question I want to ask the community board, who officially owns the lights at Birdling's Flat? Because I feel that I and others sitting in this room paid for those lights in the subdivision process that started the same as Gerald Roads on the eastern side of Coronary Beach Road. It was a requirement of the council that street lights go in, although your deputy mayor sent me an information saying that it's not a requirement of the council to put street lights in a residential area. I just find that absolutely strange. And then another bylaw that says that the developer of the land must install street lights. Who improves those street lights? The council does the design and tells the developer what type of street lights have to go in. So why do you have a subdivision in Horswall? The first thing that go in are the street lights. Birdling's Flat, the council wants to take street lights away. It's just absolutely unreal. And it's really disappointing. So I and others in this room today, we want the street lights retained. And surely there's something the council can do to make it better for people who have a street light immediately outside their place. And why doesn't the council change the lights to the LEDs, put the shields on, and have a 6-month period where people can understand exactly what the council's talking about with shading and with lights, and then have another survey. The surveys are seriously flawed as far as I'm concerned, and I make no bones about that. If I took this matter to the Environment Court, the council would lose hands down. Everything was flawed. Nothing was separated from people who have street lights and people who don't have street lights, people who are renting and people who were never notified. And I tried under the Official Information Act to get information from the council, who do they send all the letters out to? And they blocked it with the Official Information Act and with the Privacy Act. So it's very hard to get information from the council on what they do. They seem to be the law unto themselves. And I find it very difficult. So I assume that you've all read my presentation to the community board. Okay. I just wonder whether we should, what I'm recommending, or just a clarification on that. If the street lights are owned virtually by the community because they funded them to go in, then the lights have to stay. That's the way I see it. And I'm not sure whether it's a matter of law here, but I think the community board should sort that out. And I'd like to see all the lights changed to LEDs. They may have done that, I don't know. They've done some and they haven't done others. But to me, when you look at the brightness of the ones on Hillview Road and the ones on Clifton Terrace, there's no difference in their brightness. Well, that's just my opinion. So I'm asking for all the shields to go on and see if that makes a difference to people's views with the street lights. Birdling's Flat's growing and the school children, families are growing, people transit, and it's very important that every T intersection at Birdling's Flat has a street light on it. So the more lights virtually have to go in than take lights away. And in the proposal, an extra light at number 4 on Hillview Road, I just couldn't understand the logic in that. There's one at number 5 and number 4 is just straight across the road. So the council in their assessment or their staff can't get things right for the information that goes out to the community. And I think they were talking about Coates Road. And if they are talking about Coates Road, then that's the light that would be installed for cars at the car park for parking that use the hall at night. It's very, very important that area is lit up, especially for a safety reason. The staff of the council talked about removing 12 lights, and under the Official Information Act, I requested, well, which 12 lights? Because if those 12 lights are removed, that's every light at Birdling's Flat, except for Clifton Terrace, and Hillview Road. They will be the only street lights left. Therefore, all the T intersection lights that are present there today, all the lights that are outside the playground and town hall will be gone. And I know there's a 28-day period under the Official Information Act for information to come back to me, and that time will probably run into next year. So I'm not particularly worried, but it would be interesting to let others know in this room which 12 lights are going to go. They don't know, I don't know. But the way it reads, that's what's going to happen. And there are no lights at all on Ponnery Beach Road, which is the main road that comes into Burton's Flat. It's absolutely ridiculous what's going on. And the main thing is for the safety factor and security at Birdling's Flat to have street lights in a residential area. And it's just unbelievable that the council wants to remove the lights. And make no bones about it, ladies and gentlemen, I will make an application to the Environment Court and I will take the council to court over this. Because I think that well out of line and they have absolutely no right. And at the end of the day, if the lights are removed, I will never pay rates to the council again as long as I live. It's absolutely disgusting what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince.
Thanks, Vince.
Thanks for sharing that with us. And did anyone have any questions for Vince?
I do.
Yeah.
Good Vince. So you're on Hillview Road?
I'm right at the end of Hillview Road, number 67.
Right. So, like, just so I'm clear, like, so the proposal for Clifton Street, what's your specific view on the lights recommendation for Clifton Street?
I've got no problem with how do I put it? Was the council very clever in knowing that they could not turn the lights off on Clifton Street because it was part of a subdivision process with Cecil Roads, and the lights had to stay on. It was really hard for me to understand why those lights were left on. If Lake Terrace Road, Forest View Road and Poronoo Beach Road, residents do not want street lights, I have no problem with that. The only issue with me is that the lights that are existing on Hillview and Coates Road, which was part of the development to get that far, I want them to stay on.
Right. I just
that answers the question.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks, Vince. And I just got to follow up. So, like, the recommendation for Hillview Road is that there will be, out of 7 sets of lights, 4 will be retained, including the one near at the intersection. So are you saying that, like, that's not enough? That's just so I'm clear. So that's not enough. So you want all the 7 retained rather than, and the 4 is not sufficient?
Yes, I can't.
That's the recommendation.
Yes.
Yeah. And for Coates, the recommendations was for all of them to be removed, but you're not.
Definitely.
You're definitely
yes.
but you're not keen on that at all.
No.
Right. Okay, cool. Just so I'm clear. Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. That's time, isn't it? That's the alarm. So that's time for the deputation. So thank you very much for coming in, Vince, and for sharing it with us.
Thanks.
And we will now continue to move through the agenda.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Oh.
There's no more on the line.
There'll be the board report and decision.
Is that covered?
Yes.
Shall we do that
We could jump to that.
Okay. Keep hovering, because we'll do that now.
Okay, so then let's move forward to item 9 and invite Andrew to the table. And Andrew and Jacob. Thanks, Jacob. So it's just to 9, which is
Page 35.
page 35. Birdling's Flat Street Lighting Report. Excellent. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I'd just like to thank Helen and Vincent
Oh,
for
sorry.
coming this morning. Yep.
Move around his book. So this is just bring them to the table.
Together.
Lovely. So just before we step into the report, if I can have a mover and a seconder to get the report on the table. Moved by Tyler and seconded by Luana. And all those in favour? No one against? Oh, I don't need to do that. There you go. It's on the table, it's on the table. But not one. It's a new board chair. Welcome again. Welcome again.
Thank you.
Let's pretend that never happened. The time starts now.
Okay, so yeah, as I was saying, I think Vincent and Helen portrayed greatly what's been going on in Birdling's Flat over the last 4 years. There's been a lot of passion around this discussion, this debate, and it's great to hear both those sides today. There are those obviously for and against. I don't know if everybody knows Jacob. He's the manager for planning and delivery for the transport team. So he's come along to meet people today and to watch the proceedings go through. So it's probably best if I just give you the history of how this came to council in the first place. So we embarked on doing an LED upgrade across the whole of Christchurch. This was basically off the back of funding by NZTA, funding 85% for LED upgrades. So Christchurch Council put a business case together to upgrade all their NZTA subsidised lights within the 3 years that we had, that 85% subsidy, basically gave us maximum return and we can be making savings. I think the total savings was about 1.5 million once the NZTA lights were all changed over to LED, and that was through power and through maintenance, because we've got a smart system in as well, reduces the amount of maintenance. People driving around having to look at lights, we get told through the system now. So that was the key thing that started it off, because the community of Birdling's Flat saw the LED lights that were going up around Christchurch and decided that they didn't want something like that at Birdling's Flat. This was brought to council, and we agreed that we would enter into discussions with Birdling's Flat over what they wanted their lighting to look like. We acknowledged that it's a unique environment. It is away from the city, it's next to a lake, it's by the sea, it's quite an isolated community. People quite often move there to be in that environment, and so it's a different demographic. So we were prepared to treat it as such. So we entered into discussions with the community, and we came up with 3 options that were certified by management that we could put to the community as possible lighting options. And they came up with no lighting, retain all the lighting we've got, or a form of what we call flag lighting, which is lighting key points where you might get clashes with vehicles. So that would be like intersections on some roads on the bend, maybe if you want to get visual all around the road. So it's not specifically a string of lighting, but it's just lighting key points. So I think in the initial one, we had 2 different options with the flag lighting and the no lighting and the retained lighting. So that, after sitting down with the community at a drop-in and explaining what we were looking at, what this meant, we put out a survey. From that survey, I think we got around 57–60% of people were interested in no lighting, or no lighting in their street. So we had said that if that was a strong voice within the community, we weren't prepared to just take all the lights out until they knew what that actually meant to have no lighting. So off the back of that, we did a trial where we switched the lights off for 6 months. Now, before we did that, we went to the local police officers and said, have you got any issues with us turning all the lights off and Birdling's Flat having no lights? And they said they didn't. So there was we didn't see that there was any risk involved with that. What we also agreed was that halfway through the trial, we would put up some LEDs at the colour temperature as recommended by the dark skies. That's 2000 Kelvin, it's 2700 Kelvin, it's an orange type light, very similar to the high pressure sodium. So that's why halfway through we put 3 lights up in Clifton Street, so that people get the idea. Now, unfortunately, because of the market at the moment in lights, we didn't have time to actually order those lights and put up ones, the exact ones that we wanted. Obviously, if we had, we would have put ones up that were shielded and created an exact look of what we would have put in. The ones that we got were ones that were available within the country. So that's what we put up so people could judge the colour temperature. Now, Helen, I spoke with Helen early on, and I think actually we've got some photos of that. If you could put that PowerPoint up and just click on to the last one. So Helen's property is on the right there, and this was taken just after they had been put in, I think a week or two after they had been put in. And you can see the light goes back a long way on the fence. So the lights that we put in didn't have a very good cut-off behind. After that, we did tilt the lights 5 degrees and we dimmed them right down, and I have actually got a photo of that. Now, it's considerably better than that, but obviously from Helen's point of view, it still wasn't enough to alleviate the issue of that light being there. Unfortunately, we didn't have the light with the backlight shields to be able to show Helen exactly what it was like. So that's the worst case scenario. We then reduced the power by 50%. We tilted it by 5 degrees, so that's brought it forwards. And then putting in a shielded light will again improve that. So that's why we did the trial. The 2 lights on the left there, they're in Barnes Road. So you can see, and the point, it's actually, it looks brighter than what it is. If you, oops, it's gone.
Doesn't look brighter anymore.
So if you look at the tree behind the light, you can see there is some light coming behind, but very little.
Apologies for just resharing so it goes onto the live stream.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that was my comment about the trees and Barn Street. There's lots of trees as well.
Yes,
It's quite a
yeah,
different
yes,
environment.
it is. Yeah.
All right, we'll get better.
We can move on from that anyway, so I can carry on. So that's why we changed the 3 lights in Clifton Street. So it's mainly around the colour temperature, because a lot of people had seen the LED lights in Christchurch and the 4000 Kelvin neutral white, and it's not what they wanted in the environment. So we did that, and then at the end of the 6-month trial, we turned all the lights back on again. Now, we then went to the police and we got a report on statistics from that 6-month period and the same 6-month period the previous 2 years, and looked at the crime, and the crime had actually reduced during that period. So we were happy that, you know, if there was a decision to take all the lights out, then we were comfortable that it wasn't actually increasing crime. The one thing I would say, and it's something to bear in mind, that when we design lights, we don't talk about lights reducing crime. We talk about lights reducing fear of crime. So that's what you've got to remember. If someone is afraid of crime, then having a light there may alleviate that. So it doesn't necessarily have to line up with stats on crime. If you fear crime, then you feel safe with all the lights. That's why that's within the design standards. So it's just something to bear in mind. So then we put out another survey. Now, the first survey we did through Jane, who's on board there, who's community, what's her title? Community Liaison Officer?
Community Development.
Development Advisor, thank you. We did that because this was a community project. It was a community-run project. It was all being driven within the community. When we came to the final survey, because there was very whole opinions within the community, we went to our engagement team. And our engagement team obviously work to a higher level of legality, if you like. So they dot the I's and cross the T's to make sure that we're not straying from council policy. Now, as I say, the first survey, this was just getting a feel within the environment, which allowed us to move on from there. But this was the final decision. So that's why we got the engagement team on board. Now, the other thing that was different when we put out the survey the second time, we also sent it out to absentee landowners or household owners. So if you owned a home there or was renting it, or you owned a piece of land there, you also had a say on it. And again, this is to do with, obviously, even though they weren't, if you like, living within the community, they have a vested interest in that property, and they could believe, obviously, that the value is being changed due to the decision that's been made. So the second survey included those people as well. So everybody who was living at Birdling's flat, they had hand-delivered letters, and then everybody who was an absentee owner, they had theirs delivered through the post. Now, during the process of receiving those, it was, if you were an absentee owner and somehow you got one there, you weren't allowed to double up. So only one result could come from one property in that respect. Now, the only difference to that is if people were renting, if you had 3 people living in a house separately, they all got a vote. Now, what was quite interesting is we actually had houses with 3 votes that came in, and they were all different. And that's why, and this was brought to us early on, and it was actually, I believe, a husband and wife or a partner. And the lady said, well, I need to vote because I don't believe the same as my partner. So we allowed that to come in. And obviously that was monitored, that it wasn't being abused, that we weren't getting lots of people just putting in votes, and that didn't happen. So that's been followed, as I say, through by the engagement team, and it's been done to the letter of Christchurch law, if you like, with regarding to engagement. So that was quite clear and cut. So we then got the survey results back. And I guess, unfortunately, in some respects, it was quite close. The majority of people, if you just look at the options, the majority of people went for option 2, which was removal lights, and that was 54%. So as a community, 54% of people said that they wanted all lights removed. Now, we've actually combined the other results and saying there's 54 people that want lights removed, but then there was 46% of people that wanted some form of lighting. Might not have been all of it, but they want some sort of lighting at Birdling's flat. Now, as council, we didn't see that as a mandate to take all the lights out because it's so close to 50-50%. And it's something I spoke with people out at the drop-in centre, and my apologies, this wasn't probably put in the engagement paperwork perhaps as it should have been. It was never a first past the post decision. And I made this very clear at the last drop-in because people tried to tie me down to what percentage does it have to be before you take all the lights out. And there was more to it. It's a bigger question. It's understanding what people are trying to achieve by their lighting, you know, what the problems are if you take it out. So it was never going to be a first past the post. So we didn't see that 54% was a mandate for ripping out all the lights at Birdling's flat. So that was our first stance. And then we wanted to look at, well, where do we go from there? You know, how do we fit this to fit what's come back from the community? So with that in mind, we then started looking at obviously street by street, and as Vince has alluded to, there is a disparity in as much as some of Birdling's flats got good lighting at the moment. In fact, some of it's got very high level of lighting, and other areas got no lighting at all. So if people are happy living with no lighting, should they be telling another street that they should have all their lights taken out? So I guess when we looked at it, we looked at it as a community, and as a community, just over half wanted all the lights taken out. And then we looked street by street and thinking, well, those people have got more weight within that street. So we'll look at it street by street. And when we looked at it street by street, it was around the 50-50 again. But there was just slightly more that wanted to retain some sort of lighting. Now, those that wanted to retain all lighting was less. I think retain all lighting was overall was 18% in the community. Only 18% of people wanted to retain all lighting. But within, let's look at Hillview Street. If you looked at those that wanted to retain all lighting and those that wanted lighting at intersections, which meant there would be lighting along Hillview, that was about 52% that wanted to retain some sort of lighting in Hillview. So when we looked at that, we then looked at those three roads. It came out that Hillview Road, yeah, the majority wanted some sort of lighting. Now, again, we've looked at it and looked at the original option that we put forwards, and it had two lights, one at the end, one at an intersection, and then one at the intersection at the end. Now, those people that wanted to retain all lighting, obviously that then leaves a section without any lighting at all. And there was people that were happy to have it at intersections. So we then put we retained another light. And again, my apologies for the confusion that's been caused over this. Now, I know in the report, there's a map that's accurate of where those lights are, which ones were taken out and which ones were moving. But I believe the people who submitted also got a letter, and in that letter, it did give the wrong address. So my apologies for that. That's where that confusion came. So we're not putting in an additional light. We're retaining an extra light from our original option. So our original option was 3 lights along Hillview Road. And we retained another one to try and give light all down that street. Again, to sort of cater for those that wanted light along the street. With Coates Road, with Clifton Street, again, so looking at that, so option 1, which was retain all lighting, we had 3 people. Option 2, to remove all lighting, was 3 people. So again, I mean, it's very hard to sort of to split it, but then when you look at the other options, the other 2 options retained lights within Berlin's flat. Now, one of those retained lights at the intersections, which meant that Coates Road would have lighting. So more people, again, in Coates Road wanted some form of lighting, but no lighting. Clifton Street. I say. Sorry, Clifton. Too many C's. Thank you, Clifton. Yeah, so in Clifton Street, there was more people that wanted to retain some sort of lighting in the street and wanted to take all the lighting out. So again, there was that process of what do we do, and we felt by having that light in the middle, it looked at everybody's best case, apart from obviously Helen, who lives at the house off to the side, which I have to say is the worst possible place for a light, because traditionally lights shine like butterfly wings. So if you're directly behind the light, you'll get the least light, and then it comes out more and more. So she's perfectly in line for getting good quality light. What she doesn't want. So we believe that with the addition, as I say, we worked with Helen and we couldn't get it to something she was happy with the light that was up there. But the light that was up there didn't have any backlight shields. Now, I believe that with the backlight shields, the light going onto the property, we can resolve that and make that work, I believe. That's my belief. So that's why we put that in, because it actually caters for those people that wanted all the lights, and it caters for those people that wanted lights at intersections, so wanted lights within the streets. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for Helen, and I acknowledge that. So then moving on to Coates Road. And Coates Road was slightly different, and it's the one that stood out because it was the only street within Birdland's flat where it had lights, and the majority of people in that street didn't want lights. So I think it's about 77% didn't want lights within that street. So their option either was for no lights or lights just on the main road in, which meant there would be no lights in that street. Now, we saw 77% as a mandate for taking the lights out of Coates Road. We thought that was a large enough percentage to actually take them out. So, I mean, you had the community where the majority wanted them out, and then in Coates Road, you had a large majority within the road where the lights actually were that didn't want the lights. So we saw that as community and at the road level, that was appropriate. So that's how we come to the design that we put forward in the report. Just to talk to a couple of points that Vince brought up. I mean, the legality of what we're doing. Obviously, we didn't enter into this lightly. Council was not driving this from the start. Birdlands Flat would have been the same as any other street in Christchurch. We would have gone in there, changed it 1 for 1, done it 4 years ago. We would have got the extra subsidy on it and we would have walked away. Now, we chose as council to engage with the community because it was brought to us, and we bought into this process. So that's why we've gone down the road we have. Not because we were pushing something, but because we were responding to what we heard. And again, because it's a unique environment, and we've been working with NIWA, who have been doing a study on aquatic insects. That we were waiting for that report to come out as well, because that again would have impacted on what sort of lighting we put up. So a lot went into, creating something special in this environment, which fitted the environment and fitted what the residents want. So we don't have to put lighting in as council. We're not mandated to put lighting in. And you'll see places like Port Levy, for instance, you've got a community there, they've got no lights. So, I mean, that shows, how that's gone in the past. But when you look at road lighting standards, when you look at the Government Act, we don't have to put lighting in. Now, when you look at Birdlands Flat, and I think Vincent didn't bring up the Act of Parliament 1994, well, it was actually a Birdlands Flat and Land Titles Act 1993. Now, again, we haven't taken this lightly. This has all been put through legal, and they've scrutinised it at every level. So those early levels, and now they've obviously gone to a much deeper level. So they've looked at all the acts that relate to Birdlands Flat, and there was the original Land Titles Act in 1993, which doesn't specifically mention lighting at all. So there's nothing in there, there's no responsibility under that. The titles for the properties have also been looked at, and there is nothing on the title that says lighting has to be provided. Now, there are other documents in private lanes and things like that that went back to the So the Municipal Electrical Department were responsible for lights in private lanes. So there was an agreement that came up that if developers created a private lane, the light would be installed, council would look after that light, and that light had to stay there. That then changed later on in 1990, and then again it's come into just standard council policies in 2020, and we don't do that anymore. We don't put lights in private lanes and look after them. So that's been changed through that. So that's something that we used to, but we don't anymore. Birdlands Flat didn't come under that, but that's just something to be aware of. If you hear of places where we are looking after lights in private lanes, that's why, because it was an agreement at the time between the municipal power company. So basically, we've looked at it, and the lights are owned and maintained by Christchurch Council and on property of Road Reserve. So that no one has any claim over the lights for ownership other than Christchurch City Council. So there is no legality issue with changing the light setup. Now, obviously, what we've tried to do with the option that we've chosen is to do the best we can for all parties. So to provide, a good level of lighting along the road where people have wanted it, and good separation, and taking it out where they don't. So that's been our sort of drive. So again, yeah, Vincent mentioned the light outside property number 4, and that was a mistake in that document that went out. If everybody looks on the report that was actually sent to everybody, they have the attachment that shows exactly which lights are staying and which lights are going. So that information was provided, and it's still obviously available.
So
If you go back to the report,
green and yellow.
It's in the report.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that we have a copy of it. What, is that what's in that second slide?
Yeah.
Let's get one over.
so it's the actual report itself. If you can bring up the report.
That's in
Oh, sorry, it's an attachment to the report.
It's all right.
We get the report.
Yeah, so
That was
the
agenda.
report,
I've just emailed you a photo of the photo.
It's on the way.
so we can go, anybody can go onto the Have Your Way, say, website, the council website, and read the report. So the report is publicly available for anybody to read. Now, anybody who submitted would have been given a link, I believe, to that site, so they could go and look.
And
at
all
that.
the submissions are available too, aren't they?
Yes, now, yeah.
Yeah. So is now a good time to move to, if there are questions from anyone on board, any board questions for and/or Jacob? Nigel?
Yeah, no worries. I'm rather interested in why people would want the lights taken out. Is it a dark sky?
So there was two things that came up. There was the dark skies, and that was quite a large push. And well, three things, I suppose, really. There was the environmental impacts of light. Any lighting will impact the environment. So any bug life will be affected by light. Obviously, if bug light's affected, then birds are affected, and the whole chain. So it's the bottom of the chain. So there were some people that didn't want lighting there from that point of view. There are some people also that believe that lighting is bad for humans. So some people don't want street lighting outside their home because they don't want that light coming in when they're trying to sleep at night. So those were the types of things that why people didn't want light. So yeah, again, if you look at Birdling's flat, it's a unique sort of environment. There's people there that go to photograph the aurora. People go there specifically for that environment. So it does have that. And again, that's why council were prepared to treat it differently, because it does have that unique environment.
I had a question which was just around, Helen, I think, mentioned going to look at a specific location in the city where there was an equivalent to a similar light that you're fitting. Was that based on advice from you?
So I've been meeting with Helen since the start of the trial to try and resolve the light issue out of the house. And what you've got to remember again is we're treating this different again because we wouldn't normally put backlight shields in. Now, the photo we showed earlier with the backlight shields, that was on a street where it had no lighting. And the only place we could put lighting was on the back of people's properties, literally on the boundary. So again, normally we wouldn't put backlight shields on. They increase the maintenance costs. It puts less light out. There's all sorts of issues with it. We don't want to go there. But again, if you're putting a light there where there hasn't been one, we feel that that's not acceptable. If someone bought a house there without light and we suddenly shine a light down into their garden, that's inappropriate. So Barnes Road was one of those situations where we were putting new lights in because the level of road had gone up over the years and there was a lot more usage. There was an industrial park that opened up, so a lot more car movement, so it needed to be lit. So that's why we went down the route of putting backlight shields on. So as soon as we were talking with Helen, we gave her that address so she could go and actually have a look to see what lights look like with those shields on.
So what's the next step for Helen or people like Helen? If this goes ahead, is there a possibility for channels to be open for tweaking?
So yeah, definitely. Again, with all lights, we can tilt and we can dim them. So we can manipulate a little bit within that. Obviously, we don't want to turn them down to the point where they're ineffective because there's no point having them. But the other thing is, if we put the light in and it's there, you know, and this isn't a road I'm going down, but if you wanted to enter into discussion with the community, the on and off time can be changed. You know, the light, the specific light outside Helen's house could have its own time. If you wanted, we as staff aren't going to enter into that discussion with Birdling's plan. We've created what we believe responds to it. But if that conversation continues between yourselves and the community, and you come back to us and say, we have 90% of the community come back and we want the time change, beyond the time change from this, then we will obviously respond to that. But we're not going to put more reports together to facilitate that. Yeah. So again, it would have to be community led with you guys. But there are still the dimming and the tilting. We will, if this goes ahead and put the lights in, we would continue talking with Helen to do everything we could within that framework to make that as the best that we could.
And that would be the same across any other.
And that would be any complaint that we get through from lighting. That's the first thing we look at. The first thing we look at is, can it be dimmed? Because we can do that remotely and it doesn't cost council anything. If we can't reach a satisfactory result from that, we would send someone out there, perhaps tilt it if it can be tilted. If it can't, if that doesn't resolve it, then it might be that we have to accept that we can't do any more. And again, every situation is individualistic.
I just had a question also around, I'm not sure if anyone else has got any others, but just around the timing of the 6-month trial, as far as what season and daylight hours were.
So the trial, and this was again why we didn't get the exact luminaires we wanted. The key was we wanted to get the shortest day of the year. We wanted to make sure that people had experienced the worst case scenario with no lights on. If we'd done it in summer, people would go, oh, that's fine, yeah. And then in the middle of winter, when it's raining and it's dark early, and they go, actually, I don't like this. So we were very mindful of, we wanted the trial to be a true representation of, it's not going to get any worse. This is what no lighting is. So that was why it was timed when it was, and that's why it probably happened very quickly. And again, that's why the luminaires that we put in, we didn't have the time with obviously COVID and freighting to get them in. So we used what we had available in New Zealand.
Excellent. Are there any Tyron?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good report, gents. Thank you. Very thorough. So just on, is it Coates Road, which is where it's proposed that all the lights are removed? That's right. Coates. So what does removing the lights look like? Does it just mean leaving the existing infrastructure there, but removing all the light bulbs?
So
actually,
yes, on Coates
chopping down the lights.
It's powered by the overhead network. So it's basically on the power lines. So they don't belong to us, they belong to Orion. So all we would do is take our lighting bracket off. Now, if you go onto Hillview Road, you've actually got lighting columns and the light on. Now we own those columns, so I could take those columns out. But if it's an Orion pole where we've just bolted a bracket and light on, we'd remove that and we would tell Orion that we've disconnected our light from the network.
So it's not a, I mean, removing the bracket from the Orion pole, like that's a reversible thing, right?
It is.
Everything.
What I would say is, and this is why, again, we made it very clear in the early literature that if we agree to take lights out, it's going to be very hard to justify putting them back at a later stage. Now, Orion policy now, if we wanted to put lights on some of those poles, they'd probably get refused because of the condition of the pole. Because they've changed the rating for the conditions of the pole. So every pole that didn't meet the right condition, council would then have to pay to replace that pole, which means taking all the wires off, putting a new pole in, putting all the wires back on. That's costly. Now, to come back to Birdling's flat and say we're going to spend 30, 40, 50,000 on putting lights back into a community where we've spent 4 years engaging with the community to come up with an option, it would be a hard one to sell. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. Obviously, yes, we can hold that back on. Yeah, it's not irreversible. But practically, it's not something we would promote.
And it will make everybody look silly, probably.
Okay, I think, is that you?
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, we've got one question from Nigel and then we might need to.
Just one final one. Okay, that infrastructure's there. Why not just leave it there? People, it is reversible. Why remove those?
Basically, if we've got a light on there, we have to maintain it. We can't just leave a light on the pole and forget about it. If we're going to maintain it, it becomes part of the maintenance contract and people go out there and maintain it. So from our point of view, again, when we came into this wasn't us driving it, this was a community. Now, we've been through this, and the community wants them taken out. The best case scenario for us is they get taken out completely. If they're going to be taken out, not that we leave them on there, and then we have issues with Orion, we have issues with maintenance. They're either there or they're not. That's what we brought to the community, and this is where the community comes in.
Just extent of that.
Yeah, if you could just speak up slightly, just so.
Yes, all right, if all those here. Okay, so if you left it there and it's the timing thing fascinates me, you can adjust all this time individually by lights?
Not the ones that are there. The ones that are there are the old technology, so we're replacing those with LED.
Yeah, but when you put the LEDs in and then time them in such a way that was more suitable or addressing some of the issues that have been.
Yeah, we could have replaced all the lights and just turned them all off. Again, from council's perspective, there is no value to that. Again, you're maintaining lights that you're not using. It's a really hard business case to say we're going to spend thousands on lights and then we're going to have them turned off. Yes, you could. It wasn't an option we put forward because it didn't make sense to council. So that's why we came to the options that we came with, carefully thought out, and then went to management to see whether management and council would agree to actually those. What we didn't want to do was come to the community and say, come up with an option, and then at the end of it, come back to council and someone go, well, we're not going to approve that. That's ridiculous. We're not paying for some. So we came up with options that within council was supported. So there was going to be no surprises. If everybody said we don't want any lights, and we went to council, council weren't going to say, oh no, we can't do that. No, you're going to have them. No, we're not supporting it. And the reverse. So the options that we came up with were fully endorsed by management and we go through. So that was obviously something that we looked at. That was an option, but it didn't stack up.
Okay. One final question.
Sorry.
Councillor Field.
So just so that I understand all the information, in summary, on Clifton, most people wanted lights retained, but some people in the surrounding streets didn't. So there's been a compromise, basically. A couple of lights go out. Most people on Hillview wanted the lights to be retained, but some retained. And so there's 4 out of 7, I think. Is that right? Yeah, roughly.
Yeah.
And pretty much everybody on Coates said, we don't want lights, and accepted intersections. And so therefore the lights are coming up. That's pretty much how it is, right?
Yes, well summarised.
Okay, so we can't take questions from public in attendance, but I think at this point, Andrew and Jacob will thank you both. And,
Thank you
for a
for
very solid presentation.
leading your way through that. It would have been nice to have been clear the one way or the other.
Incredibly thorough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And this is really an opportunity for the board to debate if we feel the need. I think a couple of things worth pointing out at this point is that this is a part A. So what we are doing here is we are recommending to council that they agree to point 1, the removal of the 12 of the existing 19 streetlights as shown in attachment G, and 2, the turning off of the 7 retained streetlights. So we're not ultimately making that decision, but we are making a recommendation to council that that is their decision to make. potentially a small difference, but a difference nonetheless. I think, I don't know whether anybody wants to raise anything about this or have any kind of conversation about this at this point before we move to a mover and a second and Nigel you've indicated.
I can talk after removing second, but I'm very concerned that you're removing infrastructure that could be upgraded, and by time of putting timers on them, go forward to satisfy some of the issues of the people that don't want those lights removed. You know, this timing thing fascinates me. I mean, if you could adjust it to a point where the other people's needs could be met, then why wouldn't we do that? And I guess from a personal thing too, I see lights as part of safety. I managed in another life, I managed the security at music festivals. The safest way to keep people out of a certain area was to put a light.
Yeah.
So I know there's a policy statement at council level for that, but that's just my personal.
Yeah.
I think that's why there's been such a diverse range of, choices, because there is strong feelings held either way, and that's why it was important to take it. The community was in charge of this, and it was facilitated by these guys here, which has been a huge thing to wade through and an amazing process. And unfortunately, I've just come in at the end, but I just am in awe about the amount of information that they've gathered and who they've talked to. And it is a tough decision. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that and agree. And I think it's that also possibly means that people, even if they don't ultimately agree with the decision, they will appreciate the robustness of the process.
Yeah.
4 years of consultation is pretty remarkable, and it shows a real commitment to try and get something very bespoke that will work for as many people as possible. So unless there's any further discussion amongst board members about that, then I would.
We've got Tyrone.
Well, did that? I missed that altogether.
No, at the beginning.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
Bring it
yes,
on to the
yes. Sorry.
superintendent.
I'm pleased you remembered, Liz. I'd forgotten that bit. So Tyrone had moved and Luana had seconded. So
So there's no further debate. No. That's
I
good.
don't think
Everyone's
there
had
was
a
any
chance to say.
desire for any further debate?
Yeah.
No?
Well, I think it's been a pretty thorough process, and this is a recommendation to council, and I think the lights aren't being removed. They're mostly being retained, but the ones that are being removed are being done entirely in conjunction with consultation with the community.
Yep.
And again, this is just a recommendation to council, and if it's a completely toxic decision, then there is further recourse.
Yeah. Okay, so if there's all those, we'll move to the vote. So all those in favour? Aye. Any against? Any against? You're against?
Nigel, do you wish your vote to be recorded, please?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any abstentions? Then the motion is passed. Okay. Now, I have in mind that we're just going to take a very brief 4-minute adjournment back in at 11:54 for the continuation. Okay,
So what are we on? What?
so we are going to resume, welcome back everybody, to picking up item 10, which the reserve land exchange for the Ushers Road Okuti, and we're welcoming Russell and Stuart, who I believe are both joining us via the wonders of Zoom, and hopefully without technical issues. We've had none today so far, so let's continue that. Welcome. Now, before we get started with you, I would need a mover and a seconder to bring the report to the table. I'll moved by Asif and seconded by Kathy.
Sorry. Yes.
And Kathy. And Russell and Stuart, what have you got to tell us about this?
Thanks very much. I'll just give you a brief introduction about the report. This has arisen through an error that occurred way back in 2005, I think it is, whereby the owners of 40 Ushers Road, they shifted their relocated building onto their property. They didn't realise at the time that actually part of their house was actually encroaching upon the adjoining Esplanade Reserve. The boundaries actually are pretty hard to actually see, and in 2005 they inadvertently placed the corner of the house onto the reserve. Because of the Esplanade Reserve, we can't lease it, and it's very difficult to sell off the land. So what we're recommending is that a portion of the area of the Esplanade Reserve is exchanged for a greater portion of their own land that they own that would become Esplanade Reserve, and they're planted out in bush and trees. If the exchange goes through, there is plenty of room for the public to still get along the Esplanade Reserve, and there's also plenty of room for the maintenance teams to work along the Esplanade Reserve as well. That's pretty much in a bit of a nutshell, really. Any questions?
Questions from anyone on the board? No, sounds like a no. And do you have anything to add, Stuart?
Well, probably nothing of substance, but I've always have something to say. The bit of land we're acquiring does have remnants of native bush on it, so that's a good factor for council if they ever choose to do any enhanced plantings in the area. And the bit of land where the house has been accidentally relocated, they have been tending and looking after that, and it's principally a grassed area and bit of garden for them. So really there's no disadvantages for either party in the decisions in this report.
Yeah, excellent. I kind of had two questions, but the first one, which was around access, has already been addressed by you, Russell, and the second was really just around the equivalent value or values of the land that was being exchanged, which sounds like it's as good or better and bigger. So it kind of crudely put, it's a net gain potentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, unless there are any further questions, then we can, even though you're on Zoom, we can move you away from the table so that the board can make the decision. I don't think or get a sense that there's going to be any debate about this. It was originally moved by Asif and seconded by Kathy. So if we move to the vote, all of those in favour? Against? Any abstentions? Motion is passed. So we now move to item 11, which is straight after item 10. Would make sense. The Naval Point, page 73, Naval Point Yacht Club Littleton Incorporated license for the temporary call-out compound. And we welcome Kathy.
And my accomplice.
Yes. Kathy, welcome.
Hello. So many new faces. I'm Kathy Jordan. I'm the team leader of the leasing team. I sit in front of Stuart.
Now, I've forgotten to do something for the third time today, which is to have a mover and a seconder to bring the report to the table. It's a new thing we're doing in this term. That's my excuse for not remembering to have done it. So Lynn, you're happy to move, and Nigel, you're happy to second that we bring the report to the table. Then I'll apologise for forgetting to do that. Then I'll welcome Kathy to the table again. You can welcome to us.
It's okay.
Okay, so yeah, any comment, anything you want to tell us about?
No, I think this is just formalizing an agreement. The Hollow Naval Point have always had a license through one mechanism or another, usually with the predecessor, the Littleton Marina Limited, that went into receivership. It rolled over on a monthly basis. We ended that when Park started all of their construction work and getting ready for CLGP and getting ready for the Naval Point Development Plan. With that work being done now to the Hollow compound, we wanted to get an agreement in place, albeit temporary, so that we've got an agreement between both parties, that we've got some conditions and stuff that they've got to abide by, and we've got conditions in there where we can get the land back for CLGP and other events that come along.
Yeah. One of the, I don't know if anyone else has any questions. I had a note here around, because there were kind of 2 points to this. And I wondered about whether there was the possibility of including a third point that spelt out, I guess, a quarterly or 6 monthly assessment from a council staff or consultant, just to look at the operation being a paragon of carbon sequestration, for want of better words. Pretty good words, not. But yeah, I guess something in there. I've seen in the report there's talk about the tanks and the systems by which it operates, but just to have an inspection or reporting mechanism in there so that we can ensure that yes, there's continuity for all out, but also that we're kind of absolute best practice or above for the impacts it has on the surrounding environment, in particular.
So there are conditions in the lease that they have to follow the operation, and there's clauses in there, but from a parks perspective.
Hello, I've met Molly, faces. I'm an old face. But yeah, I can say hello to you later. In answer to that question, I don't know if we can strive for best practice there because it's changing so quickly. And the port is currently already doing some work which we would likely have to follow anyway, but I think the best practice thing is moving. Probably move too quickly for us on that site, given that it's only for a 5-year period. But we are hundreds of percent better than what we were there. So now we have a sealed surface, so it was on a gravel and was just disappearing into the substrate on reclaimed land. But now everything that is in the dirty side of that sealed area is going to a tank. That tank has got some strict rules around and guidelines for how that works, and it's removed off-site under the requirement of the lease. There is a process in place for any incidents that I've looked at, and that's gone through some external consultants to see if that process stands up, and it does. I suppose what we could do is just have a 6-monthly review and report of anything, and nil is as good as, so a nil report would be important as well. So we could do that. We could add that somehow to the document.
I can make it we have these events, so we can just have an operational check diaried.
Yeah.
And then remind Paul.
Okay. Can I just ask a question quickly? Just so, yeah, I guess probably maybe just taking Ruben's point and just sort of reframing it. If like, yeah, is there a way that someone can just check like every 6 months that someone is not pouring toxic sludge onto the ground and letting it seep into the harbour? So we go, hey, that's not the deal. Let's revoke the license.
Yeah. So well, absolutely, and that's actually all written through the document in various ways to ensure that it may not be explicit enough. So within the haul-out footprint, that's fine. Unfortunately, I've already busted one guy who, when he got his own water plaster and plugged it into the tap, over beside the slipway and washed down their boat. So that stuff goes straight into the ocean. So that's the risk of Yeah, so I can certainly control what happens in that haul out lease footprint. It's a little bit more vulnerable than the rest of the site, which is showing us that we need to come up with some management options for that whole site. So yeah, we can strengthen up some wording in there if that helps around there, I believe. And is that something you'd want me to bring back to a board meeting or just send it? Or
I think that the terms and conditions that they've agreed to are strong and that they've got to comply with this. So it's a matter of us finding out that they haven't complied. So by us doing regular checks, which doesn't need to be a term and condition in the lease because it already says that they must comply with the operational plan and they must not breach any consents and all of that. So that's all covered from a legal basis. It's just our day-to-day management on the site.
the tricky really is we don't want them there forever.
Yeah.
So that's been clearly part of the development plan that there is no haul out there. We clearly recognise that haul out is needed somewhere. Haul out's never going to be pretty, but I don't want really council involved in the haul out business. To be perfectly frank. That needs to be somewhere else. And you know, we've time framed this. You would remember the first meeting we had about this. There was a deputation from the Naval Point Club to expect, because I actually had this in for 1 year. And there was an agreement generally that 5 years was more reasonable to find time to find another site. But I do want a time frame because otherwise it'll just
drag on. Yeah.
So it's, you know, maybe try to make the best of something that's quite challenging.
Further question? Yes, no?
I mean, it's just a process thing really, like, I don't know, just kind of put it to Liz really, like if we can maybe just like a recommendation 3 that says staff can report back at their discretion or check every 6 months and report back at their discretion that the terms and conditions are being complied with. I mean, would that, is that, or is that just a waste of time?
Make it part of regular updates if you want.
My question is the board not comfortable that the leasing document has not got that? And the only thing it hasn't got is leasing back, you know, coming back every 6 months. But as staff have pointed out, it's a pretty strong document, and they've got to comply with consents as well, which is a monitoring.
So is the other option to do what you're suggesting, Paul, which is that you make it part of your, that we make that a point 3 to this, so that we can see.
Is that what you said? So,
Yeah, I can diary it and then remind Paul. But he's got a good memory.
Look, I'm not trying to make like heaps extra work. I'm just trying to make sure that we just do our duty by the community and make sure that we've just got that dialogue.
Yeah. Obviously, those updates will be well after the incident, so you would have,
Yes, that's the other thing.
already had some communication.
Yeah,
right.
And in the instance of a, and this is in there, I'm sure, but in the instance of a serious issue, something going terribly wrong in that triggering a termination of the agreement, or something going terribly right, as in someone establishing a commercial fallout, the time frame for getting out of that agreement.
Yeah, good question.
We do have, there's a notice period in there for if there's something good that happens, a notice period. The time frame for getting out, we've got to work through all of the processes, and if it's a legal reason and a breach of consent, stuff like that, you have to give them notification, you have to allow them to rectify, to just up and terminate their license. We'd have to come back to the board for the board to do that because staff don't hold delegation to terminate.
So, and I'm not suggesting that these people or any people are reckless operators, but if there was a scenario where you had a reckless operator who just did whatever they wanted, obviously the community and the board, I would imagine, would be very unhappy about that. But I guess what I'm asking is, like, what teeth do we have and how quickly could we move that, because we'd want it to move pretty damn quick.
I recall there was something in there about being able to move quite quickly on that, because we also want to ensure that the goalposts aren't moved, and that if another operator sets up a haul out, but it's not quite what the club feels fits their needs, that it's still terminated.
Yeah.
Because can I just ask for because the way I just read the recommendation is it's like it just sort of it's not so much board oversight, but it's like the manager of property consultant to make all decisions necessary at their sole discretion. So it's just the way that I read that is that it just takes away the board's ability to make decisions, and it's basically all vested in a staff.
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, so those are the notices for like sale GP, we're giving you notice, we need it for this period of time. Anything that's going to result in any legal action, any termination, that still has to come to the board. And working through having a license agreement in place sets up those terms and conditions. So we have to work through that legal process if something went horribly wrong and we have to terminate that. So we still have to follow that. And I mean, they've been good to work with. So if something has gone horribly wrong, you know, the staff are going to be there right away and trying to cease and desist anything up, you know, while we work through whatever unforeseeable issue it can be.
Staff have indicated we're going to get notice quite quickly instead of waiting for the 6-month update. Yeah, so as soon as an issue has happened or something great has happened and there's been another haul out, staff are going to notify you as soon as possible.
Okay. Right, thank you. I don't think there's any further questions. So then the other thing we do now is ask you to move away from the table. Then if we can have a debate, but I don't, is there debate any further issues anyone wants to raise, or do we want to, I can put the motion and this will remind me and they can second it.
Lynn and Nigel.
That's fine. So it was moved by Lynn and Nigel. So all those in favour? Yeah. Right. Any against? Any abstentions? So the motion is passed.
Now, when you go back to 7 and 8,
Yeah.
7 and 8.
Yes, that's where I was taking the chair.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming here.
6, 7 and 8.
6, 7 and 8.
Pages 13. Chair, there are no petitions, just move that along.
That's changed. Oh, thank goodness for that. Usually get swamped with petitions. Sorry, this is usually a faster process.
Page 13, board members.
Thank you.
Okay, I found it. So, yes, so just move that we receive the Reserve Committee meeting minutes as detailed in 7. So, can I have a mover and a seconder? Lynn moves, someone to second, Luana seconds. Okay, so all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? So those minutes are passed. Moving now to item 8, which is the Walton Bradley Park board minutes on page 27. So can I ask for a mover and a seconder for those? Luana moves. Someone to second.
I'll second.
Some seconds. All those in favour? Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? So those also pass.
It's 2 in 1 minute.
2 in 1 minute. Yeah, wow. So then we move back into item 12. I used to have a different thing on my screen, much faster to do this.
No, item 12, is that what it is?
Yeah.
79? Thank you.
I used to run. Okay, so this is item 12, consideration of a casting vote. So Would you
I
like
move
to-
fast.
Well, I'm happy to move faster.
So,
I don't have any comment. I think I'll take the report as read, Mr. Chair.
yes, I think you can. And
Okay. I'm over a second.
so the option here is.
A
because
mover and a second.
Sorry, a mover. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Tyrone moves.
I can second.
Lynn seconds. You have any comment at all?
No, I
Liz?
have
No?
no comment.
So I guess the only question I had was, because we're an even numbered board, and most boards are not, and council is not. So then if we opt for a casting vote, then it sits with the chair. If we don't opt for a casting vote, then it's a coin toss.
No.
No?
No. If you have even 4 and 4, it's status quo, the motion has not moved. For example, if you decided, if there was a report on the table about putting broken yellow lines down for parking restrictions, and you had a 4-4 vote, then whatever is there at the time stays there, doesn't change.
Okay.
I don't think we've ever been that divided in the past.
It's unusual. It's unusual, however,
It could happen.
it's because it is a clause in standing orders that community boards have that option, but they then must decide at the beginning of the triennium.
Okay, so that means that casting votes would sit with the chair?
Yes. So if
I
the
don't know about that.
if the yellow jacket or whoever is the chair of the meeting.
Right, whoever's chair of the meeting.
So it's not usual for
Could be you,
board
mightn't
to
Poison
take a custom vote. No, it's not usually accepted.
But most boards are
And no casting votes.
not even numbered boards, and ours is, we're different in Banks Peninsula.
realised how many you didn't use, you haven't used it yet. The city boards did not have casting votes.
Did
The
we
only
opt
time
for
I've
it?
had it in my time, the only time I've had it in my time is as a council staff member is when I was at Rickatomba when we had a casting vote there. And that's over 14 years ago.
So it's a general view that a decision on something that is
consensus.
Yeah, that is better to make a decision than just to have it stay the same. Is that the general consensus? So what I'm saying is if there was a 4-4 vote and it was stuck, that
If there was a casting vote.
Casting vote.
chair-
Yeah.
So
He gets 2 votes.
his rates the
But only in that situation.
situation. So that situation is viewed better than having something that doesn't move forward either way. Is it? Is it?
That's
That's
a
what I'm
personal
asking.
call if it's viewed better or not.
It's
It's
still
up to individuals.
it's still really a decision.
It's still a decision.
So some decisions better than others, that we're trying to decide.
Well, it happened in
No,
council,
an
wasn't it?
even vote is still a decision.
Yes, it is. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Decision not to proceed with the motion or the recommendation.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question around this? I took note of what was going on in council with regards to the service cuts and that was a split vote, wasn't it? 8-8?
Yes, but council don't have the provision in standing orders as community boards. Only community boards have
Okay.
the casting vote option.
Okay, but that scenario, there was no casting vote, it just said nothing moved. Services were protected, yeah? You were there, yeah?
It wasn't, we weren't voting on whether or not
It was a briefing.
we protected levels of service or not. It was a discussion around whether or not we would discuss it as a way to
So,
cut rates rises. So it wasn't, so let's just be clear on that.
no, just
And it was 8-8.
so services are under threat, so
No, they're not.
thank you.
Not for this annual plan, no.
Slightly. So Liz has moved away from the table, which means the decision. Yeah. She has instructed us to. So
I'm happy to support it. I think it's just practical. I don't see why we wouldn't do it. It'll be very unlikely. I've never seen it come to this.
What do you agree to? No.
Oh, sorry, I'm debating now. I'm going to move it. I need a second.
So you are moving that we do adopt a casting vote?
Yep.
Yeah.
Nobody seconds it then.
Yeah. Happy to second? Okay, so let's test it. What happens if a casting vote is required to see all that?
You want us to debate it?
Yeah, do we want to have a debate about this? People want to various merits or disadvantages?
I'll say something. I think it's just practical. Like, I mean, just because the other boards don't do it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. All the other boards have 2 councillors and 9 members, and we don't. And so it's just a practical solution in the very unlikely event that it comes to that.
Yes.
The onus is on you.
So that is me signalling my confidence in the current chair.
Yes. And deputy.
And deputy.
Yeah, I think
should the deputy be in the chair?
I think I'm potentially conflicted to comment, but all I would say is that I can't think of a time when we've had 4 for and 4 against. So generally our board that has the same priorities and sees the same vision. So it would be unlikely that it would ever be required. It will allow us to move along, should it be.
There's another way that you could have an even number is if one's apologised and one's abstained.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So in that case, if we call that the debate, shall we move to the vote? And move.
Or Tyrone moved.
Tyrone moved. I'll get better at jotting this down. So all those in favour? Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? The motion is passed. Right. Now my casting vote is the end of the meeting for today, folks. No, so now we'll move to item 13, which is the Te Pātaka Ōrākau Hautu Banks Peninsula Community Board governance arrangements for 22 to 25. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Yeah, I'll move it.
Moved by Tyrone, seconded by Joseph. And welcome back to the table, Liz. Nice to see you.
I'll take the report as read, members, and take any questions.
I've got a question. Oh, you got a question?
Page 81, Tyrone, fire away.
Yeah. Haven't got my own sheet.
Sorry, just in as much as the information provided in the public forum today, does that change anything in the, or does?
We've noted that, Tyrone.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're just kind of, that's just a bit of admin really, isn't it?
That's not in this report.
That's in
the next report.
14.
Sorry. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm confused.
Oh, no, it's in the next report.
It is, because Andrew suggested re-establishment of that had to have voting parties. Does it come in this report or?
We just roll it out.
Yeah.
What about the
Mr. Chair, may I suggest that you go through each one, like, do you want to have a submissions committee, and then number 2.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Just to see
okay,
if there's
so,
any questions about that.
Yeah, so just
and the community open forum.
To step through those. So one being that we establish Te Pātaka Ōrākau Hautu Banks Peninsula Community Board Submissions Committee for the 2019-2022 term. And a quick reminder of what that essentially gives us, makes us more nimble to reply to submissions without needing to formally bring the board back together. And then the board are able to set that across email, but it does mean we're able to respond and engage in a timely manner when often there's opportunities come to us in time constrained manner. 2 would be establishing a community open forum. So this is for our meetings that are not notified public meetings, or not ordinary scheduled meetings, but establishes an open forum environment where in various communities across the peninsula people can bring local issues to us, and we can have a conversation with those issues. So it's about remaining engaged with the community. 3 is around committees, subcommittees, subordinate decision-making bodies and working parties. So this covers off the Akaroa Museum Advisory Committee, the various reserve committees with the new terms of reference, and there are a couple of specific notes here around actions that need to happen after training and elections. And in one instance, also a note on the Littleton Reserves Committee that we appoint Andrew Turner as the chairperson for an initial period of 6 months to work with that committee, which came out of a request from some members of that committee during the consultation process. There was also a change in D there to the specifics of clause 11.3 around financial entities or earnings within those reserve committees. E was around the appointment of the following subordinate decision-making bodies, being the Akaroa Design Review Panel and the Littleton Design Review Panel.
Sorry, I do have an update about that. We actually went out to the current members of the design panels, and we have to turn over to Natasha now because she got the replies back about the panel members. Which I appreciate.
I emailed out the members from the previous term and asked if they would like to be on the term this time around, namely because they didn't meet a lot in the previous term due to COVID. About 4 of each replied back. No one replied back and said they didn't want to come on. I had 2 replies from people who were either out of office or overseas, and I'm still awaiting a reply from that. But apart from those, everyone from the previous term was more than happy to stay on.
So I would suggest, I'm suggesting to the board that as the panels didn't meet a lot, we didn't make use of those people's skills as much as we thought we would. And they did do it. It was a long, I understand it was a very long expressions of interest.
Yeah, from memory, it was a very thorough recruitment process and decision to make those appointments.
So that may be an amendment to the resolution.
Yeah, so E, under E, those 2 dots request that staff call for expressions of interest, but each of them we wouldn't need.
So we could strike that out.
Yes. And you could reappoint.
Yeah. Okay. So do we need to do the specific wording of that right now, or are we?
Well, I'm going to say that you're just going to consider the appointment, no, to reappoint the following subordinate decision-making bodies and their current members, or their 2019-22 members.
Okay, so if we add that in there.
For both panels?
I believe so, yep. Nigel or Asif might be better in line.
Yeah, I'd like to sort of like to know a little bit more about that. I mean, the people there's got Linda.
Yeah, if you
Wallace,
look on the attachments.
Victoria Andrews.
Membership there. On the attachment.
Sorry. Cyril.
So general happiness, I'm taking it from the board around reappointment of both Akaroa and Littleton Design Review Panels. Moving to F, which is considering the re-establishment of the head-to-head walkway working party. So many W's, including adoption of the terms of reference dated 2 December 2019 and the appointment of the working party chairperson. So would we move that from consider to confirm?
Yes, all the resolution will change to confirm naturally.
Yeah.
But as it's a recommendation from staff, we have to consider.
Okay.
Yeah.
When does the chair get appointed and of that working party?
So I'm just going back up because I was going down to the attachments.
Sorry if it's, I've just missed it.
And there was one other thing I noticed about that, which was that in the terms of reference for head-to-head, it didn't have the Littleton Community Association included. It had Littleton Information Centre, Littleton Harbour Business Association, but it had the other community associations, Charterist, Cass, Church.
They are the original, they are the terms of reference that are current.
Right.
So who's missing? The Littleton?
Well, the Littleton Community Association isn't on there. There's a bit of crossover with Littleton Information Centre members who are on both.
what can happen is the working party can come back and ask the board to amend the terms of reference.
Okay.
So the board appoints the chairperson of the working party, item 7 emissions of records.
But until,
But we do that.
I would suggest
future
that
meeting.
it's a separate report back to the board, because we need the working party to perhaps meet first and make a recommendation to the board about who they think like the chairperson should be.
Right. So based on the deputation from Andrew this morning, which I thought was made a compelling case for getting things moving, for head to head, this is really as much as we can do at this point.
I believe so, and then staff can get the working party meeting, then they can recommend. Who would be the chair. I mean, it's up to the board whether they want to actually appoint a chair today.
Yeah.
That's your decision. I'm saying as staff, I would suggest it be good for the head-to-head working party to actually have a meeting
and recommend something
and see who's actually representing everybody.
that does make a lot of sense. So then that leaves G, consider not to re-establish the Aotearoa Office Working Party and appoint a board member to the Aotearoa Base Forum to act as the board's representative and liaison within that group.
Because it's coming under the Bays Area Forum.
Yes.
I think that's what they're called, aren't they?
Oh, that's a new one, yeah.
Yeah.
That's in the next report.
It's basically, yeah, sorry.
Correct.
So
Yeah, it's replacing, there was this closed off group that came up in the last forum meeting. That was disestablished very on in the last triennium.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much a given that it doesn't exist anymore. There will be a representative appointed to the forum, which is getting rid.
Well, in that Around the Base Forum, it doesn't represent every organization around Accra. So there are quite a few people missing, which that's what they recommended in the email they sent. They still have to reach out.
Still has to be here. We're trying to get total coverage.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's on external organisations, aren't we?
Yes, yes,
still on the governance arrangement.
okay, so if that's the end of questions, then do we invite Liz to move away from?
I've got one of the, sorry, that's probably, sorry, Liz. Just in the officer recommendation, it says that, I'm going right back to number 1. It says Board Submissions Committee for the 2019 to 22 term.
That should be 2022 to 2025.
Oh, yeah.
I thought I'd got rid of all the gremlins. I'm very sorry.
Good spotting.
Yeah.
Good spot. That means you've read the report.
Lane by lane.
That's the trick.
Very good.
You're not supposed to.
Thank you.
That's spotted. Okay, so now if that's the end of questions, then we will invite Liz to step away from the table briefly. And is there any debate on any of what we've just gone through from 1 through to 3G? I'll take that as no.
I got a question actually. With this head-to-head party, if the members would be appointing of the chair, does it mean that the council or the board has to repeat?
I think what happened was
Send a representative?
no, so the working group would recommend a chair, and then the board, it would come to the board and then the board meeting to make to make ultimately make a decision. Okay, so I'm going to ask someone to remind me who moved and seconded this. I think it was Tyrone moved it and seconded it. And I need like a stamp.
I need to remember what I'm moving.
So let's move to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? The motion is passed. So now we move to item 14, which is on page number
This is the most you'll ever see me at this end of the table.
109.
109, is it?
109. So this is the Te Pātaka Ōrākau Hoja Banks Peninsula Community Board representation on outside organisations and committees. And can I ask for a mover and a seconder?
Are they all correct, I think? And
Sorry, can I just have a mover? Lynn moves and seconder.
I'll second.
Okay.
Yes, we've noted Pam's amendments for us, so we've got those now. Got that back in my book earlier.
So may I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So just on the Banks Peninsula Pest Liaison Committee. So the way I understand it is that the City Council have already appointed a councillor as a delegate to Pest Free Banks Peninsula, and that's Sarah Templeton. So yeah, that's the end of that really, isn't it, from this board's
I
perspective?
thought the board had a representative on that as well.
That says as the council's.
Oh, okay. So council went ahead and appointed.
As part of the Pest Free Banks Peninsula oversight group.
I wasn't aware of
And I'm
that.
not sure if I've got that wording correct, but it's roughly that.
Yeah.
And so that was and Andrew was the appointee in the last term.
Right.
And Sarah Templeton.
So there's nobody specifically from Banks Peninsula?
I thought there was one for Banks Peninsula. In our list. So I haven't got my mouse. So I'm
From the
scrolling very slowly.
Like, I mean, that's probably something that would have to be, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
I can
starts to get a little bit sketchy.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm comfortable with Sarah being the council's appointee.
The board are comfortable with Sarah being the representative.
So is she mentioned just, I'm not allowed to speak.
No.
But the Banks Peninsula Pest Liaison committees have gone. There is no more.
Yeah.
So there's no Pest Free Banks Peninsula on this list. So, and that's not the council. Yeah, that's the council. So,
And it was covered off in that.
yes.
Okay, we didn't hear any of that. Thank
So
you.
where does the Pest Free 2050 Banks Peninsula part come from? Is that New Zealand Pest Free?
Yes, it is a national policy.
It's national, okay.
Banks Peninsula, there are organizations that are working on that.
Okay, so that's not something specifically.
No.
Board members, there's a little bit of confusion around it. So I think we need a bit of a briefing to update the board.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Biodiversity, pest.
Which groups?
Biosecurity.
Yeah.
We could invite Penny Carnaby to the
We could.
to the board or Mark Christensen, either.
Find a way of getting that information to the board.
Either Penny or Mark Christensen would be really the.
They would be great people to bring to the open forums that we established in the last item. Yes.
But, you know, I mean,
yeah.
To talk to us for more than 5 minutes.
No, but they can.
Okay. So.
Board members, I have on the big tin can a spreadsheet that had outlined the representation that our chair nicely did for us. If there's any other ones that are needed.
And had we?
Oh, and sorry. Scott Winter is happy to be the board's representative on this, and Bradley.
That's fantastic.
And Pam Richardson is happy to be the board's representative for rating district committee.
Excellent. So then the.
I'll just put that up there.
It would be nice to write to those people and
yes,
things.
Would be very nice.
What's that, sir?
Aaron's suggestion is that we the board writes a letter to those people and thanks them on behalf of the board for accepting the responsibility.
We will.
If
if the board passes that.
Yeah.
The board passes.
We'll have to check in with the board. Okay, so in that case, we don't go through the individual assignments in this forum. We take them as read because there are
Can we?
There are a lot of them.
We did do something.
Jamie, still on one. Sorry,
not on the ones in the agenda are in the previous terms. The ones on the table on the agenda.
Oh,
right.
what we're talking about are the ones that would have gone, that would be proposed in the 22-25 term, although there is one, did we need to look at?
There's Waitaha, yeah, but the health one that we weren't too sure about, Tory.
We are still communicating with them.
Okay, so we'll just.
So that's in the final list, is it what I'm saying?
Email as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And Tyrone has a question, further questions?
So if I'm appointed so regarding Whakaora Healthy Harbour Community Advisory Group, if I'm appointed as a representative, I've also been appointed as a to the governance group of that through the council process. So
there's another position. If there's a board position there in the Healthy Harbours.
yeah, can I do both of those things?
Not really, if you're in the governance group, it's just like the Coastal Hazards Working Party. As I pointed out in my email.
Yeah.
Because the CAG is not, the Community Advisory Group is a decision making. It's
you just show me that one.
They make recommendations to the body.
Okay. So
that's the contract.
So that's problematic.
And similar
to Coastal
Hazards, I can't be on it.
It only came to light after we last talked.
Yeah. So that means that we're looking to move 2 people from the board. It can't be Tyrone or myself. And to Whakaora Healthy Harbour and Coastal Hazards Adaptation Team.
Yes.
Yeah. So Coastal Hazards we've spoken about last time. It was established that it makes sense for it to be somebody in current focus, to be somebody from the Littleton Harbour catchment, which would be Kathy or Howard. Sorry. So there's a vacancy in the Coastal Hazards Adaptation Planning Group. So that would be best filled by Luana or Kathy or Howard. And there's a vacancy in the Whakaora Healthy Harbour that Tyrone had previously held.
Yes.
That would be best filled by another board member from Littleton or Wairere subdivision. Most logically.
And do you want to talk about the advice from reserve? Yes. I haven't got
Takapuniki.
Yeah.
We received a response from, well, not a response, we received some feedback from the staff who support the Takapuniki co-governance group that they would like to see continuity on that co-governance group because of the complex nature of the history of it. They would like to see a continuation of the representative moving forward with the future planning. It's advantageous if the board representative had prior knowledge and understanding of the issues associated with the reserve. I'd therefore like to suggest that Nigel Harrison is reappointed as the board representative to their co-governance group.
Sure.
Recommendation by who?
I think that's a request from Takapuniki Reserve Co-Governance Group meeting. So is that from the co-governance? That's from the meeting?
It was from the co-governance group.
Right.
Yeah, they just had a meeting recently.
So I would imagine that would make sense for us to respect that wish. Seems pretty, that would be, yeah.
But maybe Asif could speak to the two. You feel quite strongly about them.
Yeah. So do we have to make the decision now?
I think we do today, yeah.
Got my email.
Yeah. I'm happy to stay on for continuity reasons. Because there was a lot of background work done in the funding and also the pushing through to get national recognition. Those bigger issues.
I think that continuity concept of representation is something that we've seen in a number of instances going into this term. Myself and Te Waka, the Littleton Museum, but also even with Scotty and Alton Bradley, no longer as a board member, but still staying engaged. And I think it kind of speaks to a number of the projects that these groups are working on, especially as voluntary groups, move at a slower pace than board term can tend to be. And so there's a real value, particularly where it's been expressed as a desire by that group, there's a real value in us listening to that and respecting it, but also in ensuring that our changes at a board level don't affect the speed at which those groups are able to progress their priorities and projects.
Mr. Chair, I'll move away because you are actually going to a bit of
Yes,
debate
sorry.
here.
So, so the way I see it now is that there are 3 vacancies, or there's sort of a maybe better characterised as 2 vacancies and 1 recommendation or request. So the recommendation or request is the Takapaniki Reserve Committee, and that's for 1 position, and the request is that there's some continuity there with Nigel continuing in that role.
So does it mean that yeah, I think I'll pass that.
Yeah. So then that would mean that the recommendation will be that Nigel continued in that role, liaising with the Takapaniki Reserve Committee, and then 2 further vacancies which have come about as Tyrone's role in council, preventing him from being on the Whakaora Healthy Harbour,
the advisory group,
that one,
the CAG.
the CAG,
Yeah.
and the Coastal Hazards Adaptation Planning. My role is in chair, meaning that I've got a role in that group, meaning I can't be appointed as the community board representative to that group. So just to reiterate that we had previously spoken about it making sense for those vacancies to be filled by members in the Littleton or Mount Herbert subdivisions of the community board, and that would mean that there are 3 members of the board, 2 of whom are here today. So we could give them both to Howard and vote now. But yeah, so I guess the question would be whether Kathy or Luana, whether you were interested or able to commit to either of those groups.
I'm definitely interested in the coastal hazards adaptation. I've got more.
Great, look at that.
There's a couple where you've got Luana Howard, like
Okay.
stood up cottage.
Sure, there are. So if I can look over your shoulder at that list, that would be great. So just working through the list, Stoddart Cottage Trust, and just to remind people of the commitment levels, which we sort of determined as opposed to being given. But this was the purple category, which was appointing a representative, and there were 11 of these groups. So Stoddart Cottage Trust, we had either Luana or Howard. I am thinking that it may make sense both geographically and given that Luana is just taking a commitment to coastal hazards adaptation planning, that we put Howard's name next to the Stoddart Cottage Trust. And then continuing to move down the list, we move into the orange categories, which was just a colour picked at random. Reserve committees. There are 15 reserve committees, and the Diamond Harbour Reserve Committee was one where we had a Luana or Howard option against it. And just looking at assignments of other reserve committees, it looks like Howard was down for Allendale. And that was the only one Howard was down for, and yeah.
Diamond Harbour? I guess so.
So if we put Luana next to the Diamond Harbour Reserve Committee, then that just helps with the even distribution of those. The contribution required by each reserve committee will really vary depending on their activities, but also, as we've discussed, board members can be quite upfront with committees and groups about the amount of time they're able to contribute and the best use of their time, which isn't necessarily going to meetings, or all of the meetings. There's a further split name of Luana and Howard across the Diamond Harbour Community Association. I'm going to suggest that maybe we put Howard on that one, given that we've just put.
He's on that one.
Yeah. So Howard's on Charterist and Church, and Port Levy we've got Howard or Luana, and Diamond Harbour we've got Howard or Luana. So it would probably make sense for us to put just one of you on each of those. So it really depends whether your preference would be Diamond Harbour or Port Levy.
Probably Diamond Harbour. Yeah.
So let's put Luana on Diamond Harbour, and that would leave Howard on Port Levy. And then if we're looking at blue category, which was community organisations, in which there were 23, we had Pakaroa District Promotions, both Lynn and Asif sharing that one from memory. Pakaroa Wairewa Health Steering Committee had Asif and Nigel both on it.
I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to speak. What's an Equine Health Steering Committee?
Yes.
I don't think there is one. No.
Well, that would be
I
easy.
think that's been disbanded. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I couldn't find it.
You had like 20, I think.
Okay, so should we strike a line?
Oh, yeah, those are all my ones are all there.
Yeah.
And then we had the Banks Peninsula Water Management Zone Committee, which we had Asif and Luana on. But I think that was willingly sharing as opposed to undecided as to who committed to that. Then we move further down to, I don't think there's any other split ones, that's it. It's as easy as that.
No,
There were some others.
There were others you missed, I think.
I haven't gone through every one, I've only gone through the ones where it was unclear who was going to be taking it.
Okay.
But I didn't go through all 73. I think the yellow ones was where I kind of made a call.
Oh, okay.
As well, recommendation.
It was a suggestion.
Yeah.
No one else's. Can I ask a question? I met with Sam from the Banks Peninsula Geopark Initiative on Friday. So they wanted representation from the community board as well, but they're not on the same these lists. What happens in that instance? Is that something that you're doing formally, or is it something that how do you get on the list? Yeah, how do they actually get on there?
Why are they there?
So do we bring Liz back to the table to answer that question?
Geopark are on the list because they were on the list last time. I understand the Geopark hasn't really done much through another hat that I wear, but it's there.
They're eating up, if you know. I think they've stalled a little bit because they're wanting women representation.
Yes, and that's where it's stuck.
Yeah. So they're not currently on the list.
Yeah.
But if they did resume activities, or if they accelerated activities, they could come to the board and ask for a representative.
At any time?
That separately.
At any time?
Just like council may actually start a working party on putting particular things in Middleton Harbour. They may ask for a board representative on that council working party. So just any organisation can come to us, and it's up to the board whether they say, well, yes, it's a good fit for us or no.
Yeah, so it's not something we can do in this meeting, but we could suggest to him that he comes to the board forum and makes it as a request.
Oh, good.
It's a process we could get underway. Okay, so on that basis, hopefully everybody has kept up with what we've suggested as far as the representation on outside organisations and committees. Lynn moved it and Asif seconded it. Do we want to have any further debate?
Sorry, just another question. Autumn Bradley Park, is that?
So got winter statement.
Plus, okay, no, plus.
Plus, I think
I'm happy, yeah, I met
you
with.
and I think Howard, because I think, or are you on it as councillor? I think by default to Autumn Bradley.
I met with David Ferguson yesterday.
There's three
for a chat
people.
with him.
Yeah, so I think 3 from the board, but is it the councillor and 2?
Two representatives.
So then it would be Tyrone, Luana and Scott.
I just need to get that to
I don't think I was appointed to it.
No, I don't think
Council
you were.
governance
I think it's
stuff.
So then, okay, so then it must be Howard, Luana, Scott.
Yes.
Yeah.
So who is doing Paco or a Healthy Harbour Community Advisory Group? Who is in there?
Kathy.
Advisory.
And Community Advisory Group, and Tyrone is on the governance body.
Yeah.
Okay, so community group, so is it Kathy and Luana, it says here?
No, Kathy is on Whakaora Healthy Harbour and Luana is on Coastal Hills, so it's adaptation planning. 73 groups.
We are to Robinson's Bay, Takmatua, Tikau Bay and Wainui. I think they, Nigel, that he's doing the inner harbour reserve committee, so he can do yes as well.
That's what we talked about.
Yeah. So can.
Queens Bay Museum, where's that sitting?
Sorry, just if we go through this one issue at a time. So just looking at
residents
associations.
So they are all inner harbour, so Nigel can.
So if we put you on those Robinsons, Takamatua, Tikau and Wainui, Nigel, 4 residents associations. Yeah.
It's a bit like me being, you being on something, Toilet Harbour.
Yeah. And then the other one that you asked about, Asif, was
Whakaora Healthy Harbour.
I we've answered that one. There was an Akaroa question.
No, it was just this resident association.
Thank you. Yeah, so we've split those off in the bays being Nigel, so that covered those 4.
Yeah.
So I don't think there are any other outstanding questions or issues. Everybody happy? Not needing to go into debate. Means we can come back to Lynn as mover, Asif as seconder, and put it to the vote. So all those in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? Fantastic. We can now move on to the Te Pātaka Ōrākau Hotel Banks Peninsula Recess Committee item 15, which is on page 115. So this is really just around having the recess committee for the summer break, isn't it? So shall we invite Liz back to the table? Long time no see.
What about the cost?
Most times we even forget this.
Yeah. So is there any comment or any questions on this? Everyone understands what kind of this is? Essentially just an insurance policy should there need to be a board meeting between now and our first meeting for 2023. So if there are no questions, then we'll ask Liz to move away from the table.
I've only done one recess committee in 16 years.
We need to put those chairs on wheels for this kind of meeting for you. So then we'll, unless there's any debate on this. Oh, do I need to say who the people are? Then we move on. Oh, I didn't, did I? Haven't been much. A mover, please, for this. Not Tyrone, and a seconder. Kathy? Okay, so all those in favour? Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? The motion is passed. So now we will move to item 16, the Community Board Area Report.
So I will stay in my current seat for the secretary table. The report is read, and I'd like to remind you about, I'll speak up so people can hear it offline, online. Remind you about the information in there about the Youth Development Fund, and whether you'd like to consider
a similar delegation as the previous board had, which was very effective in responding very quickly to applications that come in from young people with a really short time frame, rather than having to come to a formal board meeting and wait for all of that time. There's a delegation given to the chair and governance manager, following an email process around the board to get approval. And once you tick over your majority of approvals, then that is processed and then reported back through the area report.
And it's allocated, an allocated amount from the material, isn't it? So it's X amount for domestic events and X amount for international.
Very small amounts, $150, $300, I think, for international support for young people.
I probably need to say here as well, because I'm on the community trust. So the Little River Wading Community Trust, some of these are intertwined with that too. So how do I just state my interest in that now? Is that what I do? I don't need to.
No, don't need to.
Don't need to.
It's not a decision.
All right, I'm better to be safe than sorry. I'll probably do that.
So you might want to make a resolution about that. Yeah. Who will be the motion?
Yes. So shall we make, very good suggestion. Shall we make a resolution around the Youth Development Fund?
On page 120. You could pretty much probably last time. So.
Yes. So yes, in italics at the bottom.
Yeah.
So if everyone can see that motion in italics on the bottom of page 120, that we approve delegation to the board chairperson or board member and the community governance management Peninsula to approve applications up to $500.
Yep, that's worked well.
So fast and via email. Often people find out with very short notice that they go into these things. That's good to give them the money before they go. And they want to get
been successful.
Yeah. So can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Luana, do you?
It's the board chair and who was the second person?
Oh, Luana was the seconder.
Right, but
Oh, sorry. So I understand. We need a second member of the board. So the one that could be you, and then myself as chair, you could be the second person. But then we still need to move and second the motion.
when you get there, because we'll just keep moving.
Oh, so we'll do that just as part of accepting the area report. Excellent. Okay, so we've looked at that issue within the area report. Are there any others that anybody wanted to ask a question about or have a query on, or that staff thought should be drawn to our attention?
It's a lot of information. Those reports you really need to scrutinise well when you put them.
Yeah.
And it's also how we report back publicly. So all of the memorandums that are in there, you will have already received those prior to being in here, but this is how we publicly report them on things that you've asked about. So it's a really important document. And it gets,
How do you, sorry?
oh, sorry, Nigel, that the memorandums that are attached to the area report,
Yeah.
you have, the board has already had those circulated previously, but this is how we close the loop for elected member requests. When you ask for information and it comes back by memo, we attach it to the area report so it's publicly available as well.
Excellent. So, unless there are any specific questions on the area report, then let's move it to the vote. So it was moved by Tyrone from memory and seconded by Kathy. And that includes the motion around
The youth development fund delegation.
Chair and Luana. So all those in favour? Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? The motion is passed. So we now move to the final item on the agenda, which is the elected members information exchange, which is really for, just looking at our schedule and what else we've got on for this afternoon, it's really an opportunity for us to raise any great things that are happening relatively swiftly, but not to raise things that are resolvable by council service requests or snaps and solves. So shall we move from my left? So if we start with you,
Really just my meeting with Sam, thanks Peninsula Geopark, went really well. Really exciting things happening there. Also meeting with David Ferguson in Bradley Park. Some really good ideas that were generated from who yesterday, so looking forward to being involved with them. And just general lump of that Dyers Pass Road and ongoing construction, shutdowns, bollards, wider vehicles not being able to get through. So yeah, that's
excellent.
I just have a few. They were coming from community members and like small groups. So one was around the noise levels and speedsters around the bays. So there's a group that came forward to match with Andrew and the police. So the community members are now recording noise levels and the speed, and they try to send data to the police. And in that sort of monitoring phase, I think just last weekend we saw police turn up around the bays, but so funny that the speeds just come after the police have been and gone. So the community have been quite active in doing their 555 recording and stuff. So they find that in the weekends between 11 and early hours of the morning is when the noise levels are high. So I think they'll keep in touch. And they probably will take it to the community, you know, the group, including members from community patrol and resident, would kind of take it to the next level on how noisy the speedsters are as well. So yeah, just sort of looking at what equipment they could use to kind of help in that space. The other one was we did a voluntary waste collection, Keep Littleton Beautiful type of thing, volunteering thing yesterday in Littleton. We covered 10 streets. We were 15 volunteers, collected 40 kilos and about 20 kilos were recyclables. So I guess, yeah, next steps forward is what the community group led by Project Littleton would like to do about it. Yeah, and just some things we had noticed were there were lots of cigarette butts, the stormwater traps were catching rubbish. So, you know, so it was just things that we noticed. Yeah, and there were recyclables along like the car park fence line and things like that, collected quite a bit of rubbish. And there's more feedback to come, I think, from the other volunteers that did collection. There was one feedback from a resident about the bird life that lives on the old wharf at Magazine Bay. So when they go to remove the wharf, what happens to re-nesting or providing a habitat for the birds that nest there, in a sort of that sort of consideration. And yeah, that's about it.
So when we come to Aguilar Wharf, we've got a fenced area there. The bird just out.
In view of Christian.
Yeah.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah, I just really wanted to hold one thing. The beach still hasn't been cleaned. I've been talking about it for months. But this, I guess, should have been a step since I don't know why it hasn't been cleaned. I think it's morning going into.
You mean stuff out at sea, not rubbish?
No, stuff on the beach. We got all this driftwood built up with weed on where the people are swimming. Okay. Pebble Cottage, I really want to say something about that because it sort of knits with the wastewater situation. The Pebble Cottage, there is a real sense of urgency there that needs to be addressed, and whether or not we can get some briefing back as to why there's the delays and because there was a clear determination that came out of the reference group following the wastewater. But the orchard would be gifted back and maybe some other associated land because the amount of land that was needed for irrigation had reduced because they've done very well with the infiltration into the sewer system. So I would like to support some sort of agency around that because this opportunity to give that property over will disappear if that some sort of agreement around that orchard isn't sort of nailed down.
But what if there is community objection to it at the same time?
Well, then those discussions, that consultation possibly should have been had, or it should be agreed now. It was it sort of came out of a reference group that land is going to be gifted with a fairly clear resolution.
Yeah, so the board has received, you've got a briefing booked in for the 20th of February. And there's been some information circulated already around the board. Yeah, so.
Yeah. That's you.
Yeah, I agree with Margaret. I think this very cottage thing is a good opportunity for the council. If the owner wants to gift it to a community organization, then I think it's a good opportunity. Two things I just want to raise. One is related to business amendment plan. So I think I'll save those questions for later this afternoon. Or if a few concerns raised by a few committee groups, so we'll raise it then. And other thing about road work in summer, is there a way, or you would know it better, that to move roadworks away from the peak tourist season? Roadwork, that's happening on State Highway. Is there any possibility, or that is just way above?
On the state highway,
Yeah.
that's Waika's Hill, so we can write to them.
The board could write a letter.
You could, yeah.
Yes. I mean, I think my understanding, and I'm not an expert at all, but my understanding is that the warmer weather is the time to do it because the winter is problematic, and potentially there would be a concern from people that if we said yes, we want things fixed, but only when it suits us, that it might be seen as us not wanting things fixed. The appetite for getting things fixed is potentially stronger than the inconvenience of them being under here.
So in saying that, we have seen dramatic change in the climatic conditions even in summer. So if somehow it could be moved to shoulder season, like it's December, January, February, 3 months.
Yeah,
it's very critical. It's for 5 months, but they can still work on the shoulder season. So during those 3 months.
So maybe the better way to do this is is to simply write a letter from the board saying, do they give that consideration when they're planning because the vital role that the state highway provides for Akaroa to connect that.
And secondly, with the reducing the speed limit, it discourages tourists to driving. Accra has been, the businesses and the cafes did really well for the day tour. People go for a drive to Accra, and it adds, the experts may argue that it maybe adds like a couple of minutes or 1 minute or something. They have suggested, but it has a psychological impact on a traveler. They say, I'm traveling 60 kilometers an hour to Accra, and it will add time. So they would rather change their plan than to go to Accra. And on top of that, we put a road there. I had 3 places where there was stopped both times. So it would really discourage, for business community.
So that could be another point that we would raise in the letter, I guess. But we haven't had, since the speed limit reductions, we haven't had a full season.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if we were comparing it to the 2 previous ones, we'd be comparing it to COVID ones, which
you could also comment in the destination management planning process too about the highway and how important it is.
It is. Are we having a briefing? Are we? Is it
it is this afternoon. Yeah, so just thought if there is a way or is a possibility that we as a board act, and it could be the same case in down Harbour, other places that Victoria's go for benefit for and the responsible.
What's the board's mood about writing a letter with those questions in it?
The speech is going to come out of the forum because it's been highlighted as a major issue.
Yeah.
Or just inform us, future stuff as well.
Yeah, and we probably won't get a reply until the new year anyway. It won't be speedy.
So I'm unclear when Waka Kotahi are coming to see us.
I
don't know if we have them booked yet, do we?
We will have James or someone.
I thought James Kager was coming to see us on Waka Kotahi at some point, wasn't he?
I'm aware of.
Probably just.
We had them.
His band.
Must have dreamed that.
We could always get to come and see us.
Well, we could add an invitation to the letter, right? So
Yeah.
we'd also love an update in person.
Yeah.
Because we get a lot of good questions from the community. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, the board put a submission and the community put lots of submissions in.
Then
Waka Kotahi did what it wanted to do anyway, and we've got no recourse for discussion on it. So we need something there.
Yes.
Well, I understand that.
Okay, so is that everything on your?
Yes, there's a discretionary element to it.
What have we got? So there was a bit of a hold up with the dog exercise area with the fencing. It was an unforeseen situation, but it is coming hopefully starting on Thursday. The Little River Wairewa Community Trust has put more funding towards the fencing to make sure that there is a big dog area and little dog area because there was a slight shortfall, and they wanted to set it up so that it would be a good, start, not kind of half done type thing that with the advantages for the community. So everybody's very excited for that Christmas present. We also have quite a big call for potentially investigating more public toilets in the area. So I don't know whether that would be some kind of scoping project that we could do. I'm asking staff here what would be the next step for investigating additional public toilets here in Little River.
Would be to get a briefing about public toilets?
Okay.
And what the existing plan is, what the existing upgrade program, the renewal program is.
Sure.
I know that there's a little bit of work going on at it was Kokorarata and Port Levy. They're trialing a very cool bathroom with an incinerating toilet. So there's been very fledgling discussion amongst some staff about trying to get a research project going that could look at highly sustainable, low water use, supporting Kokorarata with their work to see if we can transform public toilets on the peninsula in the future. So does that sound like something the board would be keen to be?
And I think it would be good
it's
for it to
really
be
just a starting idea. So it's probably a bit premature to even say that at a public meeting, but to just let you know.
Yeah, it would be good if it was around public toilets in general around the peninsula.
Yeah, and understanding what the problem is out there and how we figure out what their issues are so that we can solve what their problems are. You understand the issues more than I do. I don't know what.
What's Little River, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's a specific.
So there is potentially more toilets needed, but also to help them with the ones that they have.
We'll give you the information that we currently have around all of, including the Little River public toilets, because we had an elected member query about that last year.
Okay.
Or earlier this year. So we've got some stuff there.
Yes, please send me that.
So we'll start the public toilet discussion.
Yeah.
Add toilets to the list for future briefings.
Yeah, but also.
It's good to know where they are.
Yeah.
And I think that's me. I think you'll probably want to talk about Bevan's.
You go for it.
No, you go.
It's your pitch. You go for it.
So we had a very productive meeting. Staff and members and public tuned up. Nobody else could fit in the hall. I think both sides were very well heard, and there is going to be there's a letter has been sent out afterwards. So it's kind of like, yeah, we heard what you had to say, Bernard's Flat. This is what we can do. We need to upgrade the facilities and work on everything, and make sure that there is an emergency. If there's an emergency, there's a process there to have it in, and then Bernard's Flat very happy to have that if that is the case. But there was also an acknowledgement that this still doesn't cover what has been required from the government, and they may still say you need to point out the water. But from my understanding, that there has been some good working together from the council and the community about that.
That's the key thing.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to throw you under the bus there.
No, I'm okay. I went under. It was fine. I just got rolled out. But did I cover everything there? Yeah.
So, yes, absolutely. So I think, so with Birdlings Flat, so there's been quite a significant pushback on, I don't know how much of this you've picked up on, team, but there's been quite a big significant pushback by the community there regarding water chlorination in that community. The water's never been chlorinated before, and so and as far as I'm aware, they don't want it to be chlorinated ever, and it seems to be pretty much universal across the community there. But anyway, to cut a long story short, there's been quite a lot of engagement by council staff who have really worked very hard on being able to have the appropriate conversations and push back where they can with Taumata Arawai, which is the water regulator in Wellington. We're getting into some quite untested waters with new legislation, so new regulations.
That's right.
So
out of our control by some of it.
Well, so it's not getting into the whys and wherefores of the regulations. Like, I think that the community have expressed a very firm desire that they want to see their water chlorinated. However, people understand that the wellhead does need to be repaired, and so we're just working through a process now between residents and staff and Taumata Arawai as to what the best way forward is here. But the water has not been chlorinated thus far, and is not likely to be, well, it won't be chlorinated this year. And well,
not much of this year.
ultimately, like, but the safety of people's safety is the most paramount thing. So we're just working through a process. So hopefully everyone can get what they want out of it. Fingers crossed.
Anything else from across your desk?
In no particular order. I have had some discussion with the boat safety group regarding the breakwater at the existing breakwater at Naval Point. And there's some concern that at high tide, there are parts of that breakwater that are submerged that present a navigation hazard to boat users. And there is quite a bit of anecdotal evidence that boats have been damaged because they aren't aware of the hazard. Now, it's been quite frustrating for that group. And just getting back to a theme that we explored earlier in this meeting, between getting bounced around between different agencies, where the accountability, it's not clear where the accountability lies. But what I'm asking here is that we can just raise that with the appropriate staff, that it's been noted by a volunteer community group that they are concerned about the navigation hazard that the breakwater provides, and can there be some buoys there that...
It's a simple solution.
Yeah.
It's not complicated or expensive.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's a conversation with Christine or wherever it is.
Yeah.
Cool.
Especially, I think there's a lot of new boat owners, summer months, going out and taking the bottom off their boats.
Yeah, nobody wants to take the bottom out of their boat, or nobody wants anybody to take the bottom out of their boat, whatever it is. Yeah, that sounds bad. Cool. So just probably like stuff that you could pick up in the news, but I think it's worth just raising to the board just in case you've missed it. Like, so we had at council last week, we, how do I express this? So we've agreed on how to, like, so council's been allocated a funding package from government, which is called Better Off Funding, which is in relation to the Three Waters legislation. Basically, it's it's recognising that there is some impact, and here's some cash to help you do some stuff. So out of that, so council's decided on a whole bunch of projects across the things that it wants to allocate that funding to across the city. But pertinently for the peninsula, it's quite a bit sort of earmarked for restoration and biodiversity projects on the peninsula, which I think is going to have so more information to come out of that, but like that's going to have a really significant impact. So it's good news, and I think that you guys would all be, team, you'd all be because you're not all guys, the team that you'd be very interested in that and supportive of that. And secondly, there was some money allocated to removing the barriers for young people to be able to swim. And given that we're quite a coastal ward, I think that's quite a good step forward. Like that's a real community focused thing that has a real impact on people, just helping people to
How
be able
does it look
to.
like? Their support, how their support look like? Are they providing building the facilities?
That's the 60, that hasn't really been kind of teased out yet, but there's $200,000 allocated to that. So there's actually an established program, and I'm hazy on the details, but it will try and, I think, with the program's being established by other agencies, so not council, into helping young people swim and helping remove the barriers for that. So I'm a bit sketchy with the details.
The momentum and the money.
The momentum and the money is there. That's exactly. That's well said. What else do I want to say out of council last week? Oh, probably nothing that needs to be raised right here. No, that'll do me for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just two very quick things from me. One was I attended yesterday the Te Waka Christmas function, which was at the Littleton Top Club, which is closing on the 18th of December, very short notice and very surprised club members. So that's going to have a big impact locally in Littleton, the closing of the club. But also it was good to get an update from Te Waka about their plans and their forward movement of their consent process, which has been often delayed and slowed down, but you cannot keep that group of people down. So they are pushing on, which is good. And also just a very quick update that Naval Point and the work that's happened down there, with the exception obviously of the breakwater, which was hidden below the surface of the water and poses problems to boat users, but the paintwork, the new footpath, the access down there is looking fantastic, and a lot of people are really impressed and also really proud of what's happening there, but also very protective of making sure that it doesn't become more racer zone. There's cameras, there's lights, there's barrier arms, there's all of the other things that are happening there to make it a really good safe space for the community to use. But on the most, people are really excited about that. So that's all I had for members exchange. The only other thing I want to just double check was that we did capture in 14, item 14, the letter writing with thanks to those non-board members who had taken out those roles. Excellent. And I'm also just aware of time and that we are now an hour and 3 minutes behind schedule. So I'm going to suggest that we close the meeting at this point, and then take a lunch break, which would have us back in the room at 2 for a booked Zoom on the destination management plan. And I guess from there we'll work out how we fit everything else on our agenda.
We'll talk about that once we close the meeting.
Yeah. So Luana, if you could take us through our closing karakia, that would be great.
Thank you. Inihia, ki te uri tapuni, ki a wātia, ki a mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua I te ara takata, kui a rā I rongo, heirea a ki runga, ki a tina, kui e tai.
Thank you very much. That is the meeting closed.
Yes.
Yeah.